start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your spin, and Rex, I spent my Saturday watching my team act like they had never seen a long throw in before. So that's how that went. But I'm joined by my co-host Rex, and I guess your weekend was maybe a little bit better. Maybe not your Friday, but maybe your weekend.
Yeah, Friday was a tough one. I was up. I watched it late, and I was up thinking about the game for like hours into the wee hours of the night.
Ooh.
It's been tough, man. It's been tough. 3 draws in a row is just, gosh. I don't want to say it's like a choke job, but I mean, if they end up losing, you could point to this stretch as to the reason why. So I do think it is it is a bit of a choke job potentially. It's just really frustrating, and I think it obviously, if you're an Arsenal fan, it coincides with Saliba being out.
100%.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so we'll see. And it looks like I don't know. It looks like he could be out for the whole year. I was reading last night that basically further tests said that he could risk being out for a long-term injury if he did rush his comeback and try to play in the City game. So it looks like he's not going to be available either for that game. So it'll be Holding against Holland, which just doesn't make me feel good right off the bat before they even start the game.
And I mean, it's not just that loss. I mean, and well, holdings come into place, but it seems just that it just that one change because it seems like Gabriel is having to do maybe two jobs in one. It's maybe hurting kind of your buildup. We're seeing maybe Zinchenko suffer a little bit from that. We're seeing maybe
Mhm.
Party suffer a little bit from that. So there's definitely a cascading effect, and we're gonna definitely spend a lot of time on that game. We're not really gonna do a story of the week. We'll try to kind of keep this short because I think both of us agreed the FA semis were a little dull, and yeah, you can maybe expect that with the Man City drawing because they were playing a championship side. Although Sunderland or Sheffield United have had a fantastic year in the championship, but one of their star players, James McAtee, I think is a City loanee and wasn't able to play. And Alex even
That's
said
right.
there was another guy that they have who's also a loanee. So there was some of that went into it. I mean, it was only 1-0 at halftime, so there's that. But I
Yeah.
mean, and then one goal came from a PK. But City did go on to win 3-0 with Amares getting a hat trick, and we don't know if Amares gets a hat trick in City's last game, and it's not really guaranteed. He's going to start versus Arsenal, so we'll see how that
Yeah.
that works out. The
It's not
only
guaranteed we would see him either, which could be crazy, you know?
because we saw Foden return to the lineup, and
Yeah.
in the Champions League, we've actually been seeing Bernardo Silva occupy that left wing spot, and he's been doing pretty well. To be fair to him,
Yeah.
the only thing
Yeah, he really has.
the only thing I want to touch on with Man City is I don't know if you noticed this, but Pep did line up in like almost like a strange. I don't know if they had the graphic wrong, but it was a very different formation than what we've seen. Now we know he's been doing goofy stuff with this, basically a 3-2, like I don't know, 4-1 or whatever you call it, even a front five.
Mhm.
In this, it was almost specifically a 3-3-3, and then just Holland. And
Yeah, pretty much.
maybe that's kind of the reason why it really wasn't the best game, to be honest. But the midfield, the entire field was compact in a way we just haven't seen. And I don't know if Pep's trying something new, or if maybe this is kind of just a throwaway game, or if he was trying it for you guys. But we'll see because while it wasn't, basically he doesn't want his back three, or he doesn't really play with fullbacks anymore. But he didn't
Mm.
seem like he wanted a whole lot of people to go forward in the attack. Basically, it was, "Hey, let's create something for Holland, and Holland just do it all on your own. But we'll be fine to defend any kind of transition behind us." So
Yeah.
this will be interesting to see going forward.
Yeah, it really will be, and we talk about it every week, but Pep seems to have multiple options, multiple formations, and multiple players that can play in different areas. So every week it's kind of a different guess as to what you'll see, which just makes it really, really hard on opposing managers for the week trying to plan on what Pep's going to do and how can we counter that. It just adds more layers to how good City are.
And so that was that's one of the legs that'll be part of the final, and we will get a Manchester a derby for the FA final because of what happened on Sunday. So Man United did play Brighton. This was more the game that I was kind of looking forward to. I think just kind of in general, I think a lot of people were because Brighton were the informed side. Man United, they've had a good season, by themselves. They've already won a trophy. I mean, at I think Wembley as well. They've actually come into a bit of a rough stretch. They didn't have the best time of it in Sevilla. Injuries are starting to kind of take a hold of them there as well. As we mentioned at the back line, and that kind of was the storyline. I thought just who Eric Ten Hag actually lined up with, because we saw Luke Shaw at center back, paired off
Mhm.
with Lindelof, and I was wondering, well, maybe Maguire is getting kind of disciplined because him and De Gea had a little snafu in Seville, and apparently Maguire was just kind of he was suspended for this game, but in a
Yeah.
weird way, it worked. So I don't know if we'll see it going forward. We have seen Luke Shaw play at center back, earlier in the year. And when you look at, other than Maguire, they don't really have any other options.
They really don't. So, I mean, it really stinks, especially Varane is out. He could be back soon. But obviously, not Martinez is not
Martinez
going
is
to be
out.
back.
Yeah.
He's a huge loss. But I mean, what else can Ten Hag do? Really, he's got no options, and maybe it'll help just clear up in his mind and the board's mind who we need to get rid of in the summer, and maybe we need to get rid of Maguire and get some center backs because we don't want this to happen again. It could be the same thing with Arsenal with Holding coming in. Like you don't want Holding to come in for multiple games. Maybe it's time to get rid of those players and just bring in some fresher talent, some younger, more exciting prospects at center back because you don't want to be playing Maguire. Not anymore. He's just too slow.
And with regards to Brighton, Brighton had to do a little lineup changes themselves. He went with basically we saw kind of the same thing that we saw versus Chelsea, but that was done out of necessity. Pascal
Mhm.
Gross at right back. He's not really a right back by trade. He actually ended up kind of being subbed. Well, what they did is they played Enciso again. Who I actually thought maybe I don't know if he had a knock, but he was subbed out early in the second half, and they just kind of moved Gross back into midfield. McAllister further forward, and they brought on Veltman. Veltman, I think, he's usually their starting right back, but he's also not really. I don't think a right back by trade himself. And the interesting thing
Mhm.
was we didn't see Levy Colwell. We saw Adam Webster and Dunk, but both of them played, okay. To be fair to them, both were pretty good
Mhm.
with the ball at their feet. And just from Brighton's perspective, the only thing I'll say is they were as advertised and everything, anyone that people have been said about them, for the last, couple months, or anyone that's kind of like followed soccer media has seen people talking up Brighton. I don't think they necessarily disappointed with that. They were very good in the build up. I mean, Casado was quite. He was definitely as advertised. Man United could not get anywhere near him. He was boss in the midfield. I mean, he was up against Casemiro and got the better of him multiple times. Um, and Brighton were very good with their build-up play, and everything was great until they got to the final third, and it was almost like a force shield, or something like clicked in their heads. I mean, the thought I had watching this was all of a sudden once they got into the or final third or got near the Man United box, I was watching Graham Potter's Brighton all over again. Um,
Mm.
and it was just
Yeah.
I don't know if Man United's, backline did play maybe a little role in this. I mean, we didn't see Matoma nearly as aggressive or as good 1v1 as we usually did. Now, credit to Ron Bissaka for that. I think is worth saying. But I was a little kind of let down or disappointed. I don't know. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, me too, Ben. I mean, the game was kind of boring. And like you said, there wasn't really a lot of shots. And as the
There really
game
weren't.
continued to go on,
Yeah.
especially like the 30 minutes of extra time, it just seemed like both teams were kind of like, okay, we're both just going to settle for PKs, and we're just going to pass the ball around and really not try to open ourselves up to a counterattack and lose in extra time. Let's just go to PKs. And oh, I mean, it was boring. It was boring, but we did get the PKs, and the PKs were great if you're a fan of if you're not a goalkeeper fan, because goalkeepers couldn't save any of them. But some really good PKs from some people that I didn't think would do that well. I mean,
A cou-
some of the defenders
It
for
was a lot
Brighton
of it
like
was a lot of defenders for
went
Brighton,
amazing. Yeah,
which
and
is
they were
surprising.
putting it right in the corner.
Well, to be honest, if that would have been like one of the few times where, especially after seeing like the third or fourth go in, I would have kind of volunteered myself to go in because the goal had to look massive, and the only way it felt like Man United were going to actually win this was either Brighton's keeper was going to miss, or like basically someone else. It didn't feel like De Gea was going to get even close to saving one of these, and you can go
Yeah.
back to I think the Europa semifinal or final when De Gea, I think versus Villarreal went all like 12 or whatever without saving. Famously. So, it was and he wasn't he really wasn't getting close to any of these, and unfortunately, Man United do go on to win because, Solly Marsh, did go on to miss the kick, and, to talk about
Mhm.
the numbers, you're right. I mean, Brighton had 15 shots, Man United both had 15 shots, 5 on target for Brighton, 6 on target for Man United. But when you can factor in that this game was played over 120 minutes, those aren't good numbers. And 5 of those 5 of United shots came after the 90-minute mark, when it seemed like Rashford kind of started to go off a little bit more. I mean, Brighton was 61% possession, and the passing numbers are probably what you would expect. Man United's passing number, 300, under 300 passing for playing 120 minutes, is surprising, but they weren't able to keep the ball. To be honest, it was kind of a funny thing where it was almost beneficial for Brighton when Man United did have the ball because
Mhm.
they weren't really good with it. And they were actually pretty decent at defending Brighton themselves. Brighton just weren't able to break anyone down. One thing I'm gonna say is this was unfortunate for two reasons. You mentioned the injuries for Man United. I'm gonna mention the injury to Evan Ferguson. I think he was
Mhm.
kind of. I think he's so young, so I understand, maybe Welbeck probably would have started anyways, but when Welbeck had to go off, the option was to bring on Dennis Undev, and Dennis Undev made his PK, but he did not I didn't necessarily think he looked great, when he had the ball at his feet, and there was
Yeah.
actually a chance when he did have a chance to shoot it, and he either he tried to square a ball or he, like, flubbed it, um or someone like Ferguson would have come in, and I think he would have actually just tried to take a chance or 2. And sometimes that's what's needed. Sometimes, like, just someone that wants to actually just, put their laces through a ball is worth their weight in gold because you can do all this pretty passing, and when you think about, the build-up play and all that stuff is about getting you more chances. But it doesn't really matter if it's gonna be the same outcome. You still need someone to put stuff away.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it just shows you how important to having a good striker is because like you said, all that build up, it doesn't really matter if you can't have someone that consistently puts goals in and it's really hard to find and that's why, a good striker costs a fair bit of money these days.
And, with Man United, it's a quick turnaround. They have well, I guess everyone has a quick turnaround this week. They do have,
Yeah.
Spurs, this coming week. Spurs, we'll get to them. We're kind of embarrassed
Mhm.
a little bit, so we don't really know and they just, I think, fired their caretaker.
Yeah,
Um,
they did. Yeah,
so, we
yeah.
don't really know what to expect in that game, and, Alex texted that, Bruno is maybe in a wrap, and we saw his
Yeah.
absence show up in the Sevilla game, so that could be
Mhm.
something to maybe look at, as well.
Yeah, could be something, yeah, to look at. Yeah, he was wearing a boot at home, but I think didn't he say like not to worry or something? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
And, Arsenal still have to play basically Arsenal and City still have to play this Brighton team, so, it kind of sucks
Mhm.
that, it's well, I say it sucks. An FA final Manchester derby is probably gonna be pretty exciting, at least for neutrals. I assume the atmosphere would be pretty good. But
Yeah, it should be.
I just feel like it maybe would have been a better game had Brighton go on, but to be also, the other part of that is, you maybe don't wanna see City having to face Brighton, 2 times in quick succession. Maybe they kind of get a look at how Casado would necessarily play, or I guess the two ways could have gone about that. But City was supposed to
Yeah.
play Brighton this week, and it was rescheduled because of this game, and it's probably going to be scheduled close to that FA final. So
Ooh. Yeah, we talked last week too about their fixture list is starting to pile up a little bit. So another important reason to why Pep has been resting people too. It might pay off. Some fresh guys. De Bruyne has been rested, and the fixture list is definitely piling up because they're still in Champions League. We got FA Cup final. So yeah, we'll see.
and we will quickly move on to what happened in the EPL, because it got started kind of crazy on Friday. So we'll have to rewind a little bit. We'll see how good your memory is, Rex. Arsenal
Ooh,
did go on to draw Southampton 3-3, and it's crazy to say. I think Arsenal are actually happy to end up with a point after this because it got started really early. Alcaraz basically scored, I think, in the first minute. It's maybe even 30 seconds. It's a really horrid mistake by Ramsdale, copying something that David Gea, did. I guess the day before, back on Thursday. He just kind of, he passes it. And he doesn't see that Alcaraz is kind of right next to Party, and Alcaraz, intercepts it, and it's a good finish. And what a way to start!
terrible, terrible by Ramsdale. Just, I guess he thought he could force it in there, but it was such a tight window. There's no room for error, and it was pounced on immediately by Alcaraz, and it really was a good finish because he still had some work to do from there. But I mean, just a terrible way to start. And Ramsdale, just not good mentally, not good. It's starting to show a little bit of the youth is starting to show in the running with trying to close out this title.
And then, I mean, it was so weird how similar this game was to I thought the Bournemouth game earlier in the season. And then, Southampton go up 2 with a guy scoring that just this was almost kind of cruel how this happened, but Theo Walcott was able to get in behind. It's set up by Alcaraz with a wonderful through ball, but this basically happens from Arsenal kind of getting caught on the ball. I think it's Partey and Odegaard kind of messing up a little bit here. And it's a wonderful through ball by Alcaraz. He has a perfect way to pass, and I don't know if Ramsdale can come out here or not. That's maybe worth saying, but it's a fantastic finish by Walcott. It's low and hard, and 20. I don't know when this actually was. 20 minutes or so in, Arsenal were down 2-0.
Yeah, and it really just it took the crowd out of it immediately. I mean, just giving up. You gave up a goal in the first minute, and then all of a sudden it's 2-0 within 14 minutes at home, and it just it devastated the crowd, and the crowd was really excited beforehand. And
Really
I
were.
mean,
Yeah.
now at this point, all the momentum's gone, the crowd is gone, and I was kind of like, I don't know how they're going to find a way out of this because it was just looking very bleak. Something had to change. They needed a little bit of a spark, and this was kind of the point where I was kind of wishing Trossard was starting. To be honest with you, but I mean, he would have started probably for Martinelli, and Martinelli ended up scoring in the 20th. So can't say that I fault that move, but
Well, that is worth saying. So, I mean, everyone is going to focus on the Saliba miss, holding play, and there's something that I noticed where that really did end up showing up. It might have even been for the second goal that Southampton scored because Holding's starting position was like 8 yards further back from Gabriel, and that ended up actually hurting. But it's another one thing we're saying was Fabio Vieira had to start because Granit Xhaka wasn't able to go. And it was, again, another reason why this was similar to, I think, the Bournemouth game is that happened also in the Bournemouth game where Xhaka wasn't, I
yeah,
guess, was rested. He came on later. But we
yeah.
just saw Vieira and Odegaard kind of, playing too far ahead, and so many times Partey was kind of left to play midfield by himself. So I think that hurt and showed up too. So you
Me
missed
too.
Xhaka this game as well.
I think Shaq was sick
He was
from
sick.
what I
Right.
was reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully he should be back for Wednesday. But yeah, I mean Vieira's just a completely different player than Shaka. So it really was just up to Partey kind of to hold down the base of the midfield.
And I mean, another thing that was just noticeable was just Arsenal started off crazy passive. It's just really
Yeah,
safe passing, backwards, side to side stuff. And what's weird is you don't realize it, but that doesn't all you feel like a something side to side is safe, but if it doesn't get the pressure off you, it's really not. And it seemed like Arsenal just did not, they didn't feel comfortable actually, trying to actually be direct or to try to actually advance the ball. At least in the starting 20-ish minutes or so. And you mentioned
yeah,
maybe Trossard would have been better to start over Gabriel Jesus. I thought his positioning was really poor, at least in the first half. He got better in the second half, but I saw him dropping
yeah.
crazy deep into midfield, and what that meant is there was no threat in behind, so that allowed Southampton to play a relatively high line. Um, there was just no forward outlet to kind of frustrate the center backs, and yeah, it just seemed it just seemed the positioning and the just kind of the setup was just a little off, in that first
Yeah,
half.
yeah, it really was. Well, interesting too. I mean, I kind of thought about this like Monday actually, but I was kind of like, you know what? why didn't like Zinchenko start in the midfield with Partey, and then you do Tierney out there? Because like when we first got Zinchenko, we thought maybe he would kind of possibly challenge Shaka for that defensive mid spot, and he kind of already is at fullback with Arteta. He already kind of can play in there, and he shifts in there a lot. So I don't know. I was kind of maybe thinking, oh, that's a potential option as well. But
Mhm.
I don't know. He didn't go with it. He went with Vieira, who really hasn't played that much in the Premier League. And the main thing, like you said, was it was two attacking mids now with a defensive mid behind instead of the two holding mids. So it's completely different for Partey not having Shaka there to help out.
It really was, and, Xhaka can also, recognizes when to go forward and sometimes, offers himself either as wide or maybe when Jesus would have, dropped deep, Xhaka would have been the guy to make that forward run, to at least kind of put, the center backs, to at least kind of respect it, and just there really wasn't any of that. I think Odegaard was trying a few times, but Bella wasn't really falling for that. Um,
Yeah,
and another thing
no,
that was
not at all.
noticeable was it seemed Southampton recognized what Arsenal wanted to do. Basically, just don't let Odegaard when Partey has the ball, mark Odegaard out of the game essentially. And Partey was really struggling with that. And we saw Odegaard really struggling to at least influence the game, at least from the middle. What he was doing, he had to go out wide to get the ball, and then from there, the danger wasn't necessarily really there. So Southampton did a really good
Yeah,
job of closing that middle and just kind of keeping it compact. And Lavia was doing a really good job with that.
yeah, that's a good point. Lavio is kind of a unsung hero, I would say. Just does like the hard work in the defensive midfield, and sometimes he's not necessarily the flashiest, but like if you actually watch him, he's getting the job done, and he's a good young player. This is a good get by Southampton.
It is because
They
that.
they tend to kind of do it, because they had Broja last year. Who was the fullback they had too from Chelsea? Can't remember.
Oh, shoot, I know who you're talking about,
Yeah,
and
remember that guy?
they still have Livramento. They still have him, he's just hurt.
Livramento.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So they tend to do this, and it's paid off. I mean, we still want them to get more in the signing window because they're still in trouble in the Champions League. I mean, in Premier League. Sorry, they're still dead last.
Still
But
last, yeah.
yeah, but yeah. I mean, Lavia at least is a good player.
And then, Arsenal were able to at least, get one back and at least kind of, ignite the fans again, and this is a very good goal, by Martinelli, but I think what's also fitting here is, I mentioned how it seemed like Arsenal were very passive. Martinelli was the one that was actually trying to take players on, at least in that first half, and it was kind of funny because he
Yeah,
was going against, um, was it Maitland-Niles? The fullback was not having fun. I think it was Maitland-Niles. And wait, no, Arsenal isn't.
he's a loanee, so it
You're
was
right. They weren't able to play
Perot,
Maitland-Niles. It was going against
or
no
Walker
Kyle
Peters.
Walker-Peters and Perot was on the other side. Yeah, that's right. But to touch on here, it's like the one time when Odegaard was able to actually get a good forward ball in. It was for like Arsenal were actually pretty good at being direct and playing through lines. So it's a good forward pass by Odegaard to get it out wide. And then I think Odegaard does a really good through ball ahead to Saka, and then Saka just creates a yard of space by running at Peru, Perud. It goes to the byline and he crosses it in, and so many times you see a lot of players that like to play inverted, that like to cut inside towards goal, but sometimes you need just at least that threat. That someone is going to actually go to the byline and send a cross off, maybe with their weak foot, and it's a good cross by Saka, and it's a very good finish by Martinelli, who
Oh yeah, it's a
who
great
who
finish.
basically he fakes, Kyle Walker Peters out. So he checks like he's gonna run, basically towards the area where, I think Jesus does a really good job of drawing players to actually run towards the goal or like the 6-yard area. And what he does is he kind of holds back and checks back to like the 8-yard area. And that's
Yeah,
where the ball finds him.
yeah. Good running, smart running.
And then, so that was it. That was the first half. I mean, what were your what were your thoughts? At least going after entering halftime. At least it was only 2-1. It seemed somewhat after that Arsenal were starting to get some chances. Yeah, Bazunu stopped Jesus, and there was another Saka cross to Martinelli where he tried to volley and it was just blocked. But it seemed like Arsenal at least after getting that goal settled them down a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And then you get into halftime, and maybe Arteta kind of works his magic. He's a good motivator in the dressing room, and I was like, maybe we'll see a slightly better Arsenal in the second half because at that point it was still possible to obviously win the game at only 2-1 down. but it was kind of like Arteta needs to fix something, in the dressing room. He doesn't have much time because they just didn't play like what we're used to seeing. But at the other end, I think Southampton was probably thinking, "Hey, we got a really good chance to at least get a point on the road." I mean, that'd be great at the beginning of the game if you told Southampton, "Hey, would you take a point?" They'd be like, "Yeah, definitely." So a little bit more like defending on the mind maybe for Southampton, which could I don't know. They could have been what could have been is just Arteta like laying into them and Arsenal coming out of the halftime like with fire and kind of what they did in the last like 10 minutes. But they really were kind of on the back foot to start again. So it was a good job by Southampton at halftime to kind of realize that probably Arsenal were going to come out really, really energetic, and Southampton had to like match that or do more, which they did because Arsenal were kind of on the back foot to start again for the
Mhm.
first couple minutes in this half.
I mean, a little bit. I think, because Southampton went into this probably with the goal of just getting something, this works out. But I thought it was weird because Alcaraz was. I don't know if he necessarily had a knock or not. He was not only the best player, forward player that they had. He was almost like he was their outlet as well. He was kind of dropping into
Mm.
spaces where again Gabrielle or Holding didn't necessarily want to follow. And again, because Partey wasn't able to cover everyone in that midfield, he didn't necessarily have Odegaard or Fabio Vieira kind of helping him out a little bit. So Alcaraz was just causing him hell, essentially. And it was just weird to see how Alcaraz was subbed out to bring on a third defender in Lianco. And because basically it was fully a back five. It wasn't even like a
Yeah.
back three with wing backs. No, everyone was told to be in the back. And the only thing I can think of is uh, Kyle Walker Peters and Peru did end up having yellows in that first half. So
Yeah.
maybe Saka and Martinelli actually did kind of wake up a little bit, and they were kind of causing them fits. So maybe the idea was that just kind of have an extra protection back there, so they wouldn't necessarily have to go in for a challenge. You'd have a third center back, essentially. So
Yeah.
maybe that was kind of the thinking. But another thing that did was what got them the first two goals was they went out and pressed Arsenal actually, relatively high and relatively aggressively. In fact,
They
I remember
did. I noticed that too.
the
Yeah.
NBC people were even saying, there was a quote by Sellers, the manager, saying that that was his game plan. And once they did this change, they weren't able to do that. They were just kind of sitting back and just allowing Arsenal to have just basically camp basically in their final third. And the possession stats kind of showed that it was like 70% and it was maybe even 80% in that second half. So it was a little weird. I mean, they got lucky, I think, with that third goal because it also came against the run of play. And it seemed like they had no way to win the ball back or keep it, and they just kind of get lucky on I think something happens where the corner kick happens because Partey again is bad on the ball. So Zinchenko plays him, and then Partey freaks out and loses possession, and that's what ultimately leads to the corner kick, even in the first place. And then it was weird how Odegaard or whoever it was, I think it was Holding. Holding lost the first header to Bella, and that's another place where maybe Saliba would have helped out. Saliba's maybe a little bit more
Absolutely.
dominant in the air, so that one hurt. And then it's Saka and I mean, Quesada Sar is also a center back, also a pretty big and dominating presence. It was weird to have really no one marking him, and he's just on the back post. So all it took was kind of a flick header for that to go in, and then a 3-1. That is really when you did start to kind of worry a little bit.
Yeah. At that point, it looked really bleak, and time's starting to run out too, and the Emirates Stadium was starting to empty out. So it was just a bunch of bad things going on. Just not great defending. Just not much time. People are leaving the stadium. It just wasn't a good feeling at all. I thought it was done. Honestly, I didn't think we could, even score a second goal, let alone the third. So, but I was still like, I'm gonna watch. I just want to see, maybe they can do something. But it was not feeling like a win, like a tie at all.
And it's
It
lost.
was big
Yeah,
loss.
I think Arteta sensed that as well because we saw some subs that were truly outside the box thinking. I think, and if there is maybe a positive to take from this game, I think it was that we didn't see we actually saw Arteta really go for this, and he was awarded for it. But one thing I do have to highlight is, right after, it got to 3-1, there was a chance, like, just basically a minute later, where, Martinelli, I think, gets the ball and cuts inside and floats a really good ball over the top to Jesus making a clever run into the box, and he can't keep the shot down on a target, and it's harsh, but if you're gonna be a number 9 for a title-winning side, you gotta have your number 9, you gotta have your guy finish this. So
No, I
it's
think so
just
too. Yeah.
yeah.
If you're gonna get paid that much too, like that's bread and butter stuff for him. I thought the same thing. I was like, I think I put my hand on my head and was like, how does he not score that one? I mean, because it was a little difficult, but he's a top class striker and he's paid very well, and he plays for Brazil. He should definitely be bearing that.
Yeah, or at least at a minimum, keep it on goal.
Yeah,
Force a fantastic save, even if you hit it, straight to him because it's so close. But he kind of balloons it.
yeah,
Um, but then we get to the changes. We saw Nketiah come on for Zinchenko. I don't even know what formation Arsenal were even playing at the end because we also saw Rice Nelson come on for Martinelli and we saw Trussard come on for Fabio Vieira. And so I really liked this. And the reason why I liked this is he kept Jesus with Nketiah. He gave Nketiah basically kind of the focal point. He allowed Jesus and Odegaard to kind of be like the creators around the box with a third player in Trussard who can also kind of, do something with his feet. And
mhm,
you kind of get the goal from not really just kind of, aimlessly crossing and being hopeless, actually finding a way to get the ball to feet. And what's funny is I was texting Jeremy right before this goal where it's a shame Ramsdale and Odegaard, picked up this game to have stinkers. Odegaard had a really
yeah,
good ball for the first goal, but after that, we didn't really see him, and then he really blossomed in that final, 10 minutes or so. And, it basically, it capped it off with this goal because, he gets like a 1-2 with, Ben White, but what happens is he gets Ben White the ball in the box, and then
yeah,
Odegaard is able to get the shot off and curl it. But that was just kind of the main thing. It seemed like Arsenal were actually playing free flowing football. They were being aggressive, but they were also kind of they were taking chances. Where it seemed, before this, everything was just very, they would get out wide, and maybe there would be a cross, or
yeah,
maybe yeah, it just seemed kind of playing safe, but not necessarily seeing any kind of counter threat behind them. After that
mhm.
Odegaard shot went in, everything kind of changed, and I think maybe if there is again a positive outlook on this, I'm gonna say the way how everything it almost like, it clicked immediately where they stopped thinking. They were just kinda playing freely, and you saw how good they can be when they do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess at the end of the season we'll find out, but it could be a valuable point. I mean, they snatched it right at the end there, and they could end up winning by a point. We'll see. I mean, they could end up losing it by two, and a win here should have done it. But you never know. Maybe we'll win by a point, and we'll be looking at the last couple minutes there as what really did it for Arsenal, which is kind of crazy to say. But yeah, you just never know. And I mean, I agree with you 100%. I wish they would have played this way the whole time. But you could tell
Es
like the
especially
first
with
10
them
minutes of the game, they just didn't have it.
especially in the second half. I mean, for the first half, it was just something entirely different where maybe they just weren't prepared for Southampton
Mm,
running at them. In the
yeah.
second half, when they had so much of the ball, yeah, it's a shame that you didn't see a little bit more of this because where you get the third goal is this is almost like if I was playing a FIFA game, this is how I would attack. I wouldn't just try to do cross something in where you got someone the box is so crowded you really only have
Mm,
Nkadia to aim something at. So what they did for the third goal is Trossard files the ball and it basically goes through the legs of James Ward-Prowse. So there's a little luck here. He
yeah.
gets it to Gabriel Jesus, but what he does is he's holding off a defender. Jesus was much better in the second half because I saw him doing this a little bit more, where he was actually getting on the shoulder of a defender, where he was holding the ball up instead of running to the ball. He was doing a little bit
Mm,
more off it, and he basically sets this play up. But another thing that happens is Rice Nelson immediately opts to shoot the ball. He doesn't think about taking a touch. He doesn't try to square it, try to do a cross. No, he immediately takes the shot, and this also goes through Lianco's legs. Bazunu saves it, but he can only parry it into the danger where Saka is able to drive it home. But Shaka's shot, I think, also at the end goes through Belikacev's legs. So
it
basically,
did. Yeah, yeah.
you saw it go, happen 3 times, but that, it's so crowded, sometimes that's what's needed. But and it is a little lucky, but Arsenal forced that luck by not just like hoofing something in and just kind of praying for a second ball to kind of bounce their way. No, they actually had some play to go through a really crowded box. So again, maybe there's something you can take from that.
Yeah, 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 possibly. And I mean, they ended the game on fire, so maybe they can continue that streak to the beginning of the City game.
I mean, I thought
I don't know.
I really did think they were gonna win because after that went in, it was like in 8 minutes of extra time, and
Yeah.
there were 2 times where I didn't understand how a PK wasn't given, but it seemed like Jesus was just kind of looking to go down and draw something rather than,
Yeah,
try to get a shot off, but
I think so.
I don't necessarily need to go at him, for that, but,
Right, right, right.
what
Yeah.
a
But that's
crazy
I think that's definitely why it wasn't called because he just went down too easily.
just what a crazy, crazy, game, and what a crazy second half, because it's wild because I just felt like, the shots were relatively kind, 25 and 6, but it just felt, Southampton did have 8 shots and 6, the same shots on target. But to me, it just didn't
Yeah.
until that Odegaard chance happened, it felt like everyone just playing scared. And another thing that we're saying is it was so close to also getting a third by Trossard. Trossard did a nice little clever dribble and
Or
hit the bar.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah, yeah. I think the pressure's starting to get to them a little bit, and it's still a really young team. So, we were kind of thinking maybe the pressure would get to them because they are so young, and the other side of the coin is they're so young. Maybe they don't really feel the pressure because they've never been, at in this point where they actually could win the Premier League. But it is looking like it's starting to get to them.
I mean, maybe there is pressure. I mean, that maybe that's the reason why they're kind of freezing up, and maybe that's the reason why we didn't see the kind of uh, it did feel like their play was tentative, where they didn't want to necessarily make a mistake. And I don't know if they've gotten to this point where maybe where Arteta has kind of been like try to play controlled a little bit more, and basically the chains went off, and it was almost like backyard football in that final 8 minutes. But when you finally see, I mean, you have so many clever players on the ball at their feet. Generally I would like to see a little bit more, especially Odegaard. I kind of went at him a little bit, for the Liverpool game, and the Odegaard that we saw for the final 8 minutes, I think you're going to need him versus Man City. So
Yeah,
we'll see if
yeah, I
that
think so
happens.
too.
We didn't see that in that first Man City game. I didn't think
Yeah,
Odegaard necessarily shined in that one as well. But another thing I want to get at is I feel like I maybe jinxed you, Rex, because I spent so much time praising Partey after that Liverpool game, and it's 2 games in a row where it seems like he's had a mistake where people have tried to press him.
yeah,
Rice was able to
definitely,
get to him, and it seemed he had some struggles here. I'm curious,
definitely.
does Arteta even think about trying Jorginho instead, or maybe trying Jorginho in the
No,
second half? Because we did see Jorginho
maybe.
play in the first meeting when Arsenal, I thought, actually outplayed Man City for the most part.
Mhm.
Like, it was like the first time when Man City had something like they had like under 300 passing, and Arsenal had the majority of the possession. And I don't know if Jorginho was a part of that. And I just thought you guys lost because you couldn't defend Holland, and there was a mistake that you gave Kevin De Bruyne a free goal.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it's too big of a game. I think we'll see Partey,
Oh
but
yeah,
if he has another stinker, Arteta might have to pull the trigger early, and I mean, he has a capable placement in Jorginho, especially if Partey's not having the best game. But I think it's just too big of a game, and I think Partey will be up for it too, and I think he'll play well.
and with there was no Gabby Jesus for like really any of those games versus Man City, because they happened after that injury. I mean, do you look at that as a positive? As maybe this will be a game where he will really be up for it, or are you kind of a little worried where it can seem he doesn't necessarily feel like he can be a lead striker? He maybe needs to play off someone.
I mean, honestly, I'm not really worried about that.
Hmm.
I think we'll be okay scoring wise. What really worries me is the defense. Just not having Saliba in there and Holding instead
Yeah,
is a real big concern for me. I don't know how Holding's going to deal with Holland. I mean, he has before, and he on a City one, I think it was that FA Cup game with the Ake strike.
right.
Holding held Holland to no goals, but Holding did get like an early yellow because he had to deal with how physical Holland was. Which that the physical part doesn't worry me. It's the pace. Holding just doesn't have any pace. I don't know,
Well,
how he's gonna keep up with
it's not just
Holland's
that.
pace.
The issue, I have is, he almost recognizes he doesn't really have that, so what happens is he's starting, a good distance away from Gabrielle. He's staying further back.
Mm,
So that's creating a little bit more of a gap. So usually you want your center backs to kind of be connected. Um, so you'll probably see because he'll want to have some kind of head start against Wasana. He won't have Holland on a back shoulder, especially if you're playing a high line. So
yeah.
that's where the issue I think will come. Can you stop
Well,
that from
yeah.
happening?
And Holland's too like, as a defender, Holland's too physical to play him super tight because he's just gonna outmuscle you and spin around you.
Can Ramsdale
So you
play?
do have to
Can Ramsdale play sweeper keeper? I mean, that would maybe be
probably
one
not.
way to kind of, if a ball is
Probably
over the
not.
top, maybe that would be one way to kind of, alleviate some of that. But if he's not,
Uh,
if he hasn't done it this season, that's not the game to try it. Um,
yeah, I don't think it would be good.
I mean,
Well, maybe, you never know, but
one final thing I want to say is, Liverpool went into the Man City game where Klopp even admitted he went into it basically saying, "Don't lose. What draw keeps us in this." And I think
mm,
at least one thing you can say that this result did is Arsenal have to go into this City game thinking they have to win,
I think
because
so, yeah.
City have a two games in hand and it's only a 5 point gap. City can close that off just by winning those games. So a draw doesn't really help you here. So because Man
Right.
City, I think, have the goal differential. So
They do, yeah.
maybe there is some of that. Like you go in and you know the task in hand, where you're not just kind of playing not to lose. Sometimes that can freeze you up as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, you actually have to go for it. Yeah, so maybe it'll help them, and maybe it'll be, a little bit of that, the last couple minutes of the Southampton game. Maybe they'll start the game on fire kinda like that too. You just never know, but it's gonna be a big game, and, I don't really feel comfortable without Saliba, so I don't know how it's gonna go. I don't really think Arsenal are gonna win this one.
Well,
Mainly just because of holding, honestly, but
I mean, we're gonna obviously there's a reason to focus on Arsenal's back line, but if Ake can't go for Man City, it's gonna be Laporte. Laporte's a better passer, but I think Laporte can be got at defensively. And
mm,
we saw Ake actually pocket Saka in the two games.
true.
I thought,
Yeah,
but Saka can maybe go at Laporte. So we'll see. I mean, this game will probably be won if Arsenal's wide players Martinelli and Saka can have a good game or not. Can City stop
mhm,
that? Because it seemed the way City played this weird, goofy formation, they're weak a little bit on the wings. So we'll see
yeah.
if they can get the ball out wide, maybe make a man miss and be creative that way.
Yeah, yeah, could work. We'll see.
And with Southampton's side, it felt like playing about making the change that he did. He was setting himself to basically just have a point kind of baked in. Nothing else can happen. But what's weird is had they won that game, I think they would have been even on points with Nottingham Forest, and they have a monster game this Wednesday with Bournemouth. And they can win. They can still get even with Forest. But what that means is they'll just be 1 point back from Everton.
Yeah,
So they're still not necessarily out of that, but I think that was crucial. I mean, we'll have to see. Eh, Maybe a positive is maybe Alcaraz can kind of do a carry job, because
mm,
he looks like he looks quite a player for them, but that's still a lot for him to do. I mean, it's the back line
yeah,
to me is pretty strong for them. When you look at all the teams that are in that final five or six, I think Southampton's defense is at least I haven't looked at what they've given up, numbers wise. I mean, I think it's a better defense than Everton's back line or Leicester's. It definitely leads. I mean, that's just for Forest
I would agree
or
with that.
Bournemouth. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, they've conceded 56, so they've conceded as much as, like, Leicester. Nottingham Forest has conceded 3 more. Everton has conceded 10 less. So, yes,
Hmm.
the defense isn't bad, but 27 goals is, really not good.
Yep. And then so we'll move on to the other game of the weekend. So that was well that wasn't really a top a title race showdown. That was just kind of Arsenal kind of making making people talk about the title race a little bit more. This was a
Yeah,
to this
making it
was
tighter and tighter.
this next game was advertised as a top 4 showdown, where, Newcastle and Tottenham, where had Spurs won this game, they would have been I think even on points with Newcastle, and, man, did that not necessarily look the case on the field, because Newcastle won 6-1. I think it was like 4-0 after 20 minutes.
Mhm.
This was bonkers. Goals from, Jacob Murphy, Joe Linton, Jacob Murphy again, and then Ishak got 2, and Harry Kane made it, respectable. We both texted, "Oh, comebacks on." 'Cause it happened early in the second half, and then, Callum Wilson came on as a sub and got his goal as well to make it 6-1, and, really, I think everything into this was about, the pregame show was spent on NBC, was like, "Oh, it looks like, Tottenham's gonna do a different formation. They're gonna try back four. They're gonna do a 4-3 to try to match with Newcastle," and maybe we saw why they haven't done that this year, because a lot of these goals were just, the fullbacks, D Jay Poro and Perisic not really understanding that if someone gets behind you and you don't have a third center back behind you, that's trouble. Where I mean,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of this actually happened.
Oh, absolutely, and, I mean, just crazy that, I literally 3-0 up 9 minutes into the game, and they were scoring a goal every 3 minutes. It was crazy, and not only that, but, like, the Tottenham defense was just shambolic on those goals too. They were just lazy, they weren't stepping fast enough.
Yep.
They were, like, maybe throwing out, like, a lazy leg, which isn't gonna do anything. So it wasn't just that Newcastle blitzed them, it was just how poor Tottenham's defense was during those goals. Just no passion or fire or not much leadership at the back end either. They're conceding these goals and no one's grabbing them together and huddling up and talking about it. They're kind of just arguing with each other. So
And a
that
lot
was
of
more important, was just how poor the defense was for Tottenham on these goals.
and a lot of these goals really were just either Spurs just giving the ball really, really cheaply, or actually like Newcastle kind of forcing them into turnovers. But a lot of it was just kind of giveaways. For the first goal, I think Eric Dyer just kind of gets the ball and just for some reason just decides to just head it like 20 yards upfield, and he heads it into danger. And I think Bruno and Longstaff are kind of next to I forget who. I think it was Sar. Sar's like basically playing all by himself in the middle, where Newcastle have like 3 or 4 guys kind of near there. Who's going to win that duel? And that's
Yeah,
the reason why they win that, and then they get the ball quickly out to I think Joe Linton. Joe Linton crosses in. I think he has a shot. And that's the save. That's saved, and then it's just kind of an easy rebound. For that first goal. But just in the first few minutes,
yeah.
you saw this new shape isn't going to work at all, and, that really was kind of just kind of the theme, really, unfortunately.
Yeah, that nothing was gonna work at all, and I mean, it kind of we were just we didn't think this would happen, but we did have kind of an issue with, why would you get Conte out and then appoint his assistant coach Stellini? He's basically just going to do the same thing Conte did.
Well,
So
this
like,
maybe he should have, because he did try
ma-
something new
no,
this game,
he
and,
tried.
it did not work out at all. I agree with you, though. I do think this is more, Newcastle actually, scoring 6, looked like they could have scored 10. Um, and some of these finishing, were good. I mean, Laurier's maybe could have done better. We'll get to that as well. There's the 2 ways to look at this, where Newcastle, finding their scoring boots. Again, this has happened when, Almiron has missed some time. There's no, St. Maxian. Ishak has
Mhm.
taken over Callum Wilson. So it is a different side than we saw, versus Man United in that, EFL final, in that league final. But I remember kind of 2 months ago, we were like, "When Newcastle's gone, like, 4 or 5 games without really scoring, what's Howe gonna be able to do to get that to change?" And it looks like, he fixed that, at least for this game.
Yeah, it's funny to think that we were talking about how Newcastle were having trouble scoring only a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it turns out it's just a little blip, and I mean, man, this was a huge result because 6 goals for Newcastle, and not only that, but against a top 4 rival in Tottenham, it was just a huge game, and I think all of us watching were just kind of in awe. It was a wild game. I don't think I've ever seen a first half like that.
It's
I've never seen a first 10 minutes like that.
it's scary, what that ground, because that ground can get rocking, and,
Um,
One take I was having is I don't know if Newcastle's gonna drop points, at any more of their home games, and then I looked on the schedule and I was like, "Oh, I don't necessarily need that." I'm gonna need Arsenal to kind of, reverse that trend a little bit because I think you guys go to St. James, maybe even after Man City. Um,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's definitely that. I think Chelsea and Newcastle are two of the good teams we play after City that we have to worry about. So
Maybe it'd be hopefully it's Chelsea in between because if you beat Man City, that's gonna give your players such a lift. That would be really especially at away ground. That would be hard to or that would be really easy to see them having too many emotions to be able to regroup. So Chelsea would maybe
yeah,
give you some kind of cover at least for that.
hopefully, yeah,
It's weird to say that, but that's just kind of the state that Chelsea's in. Um,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, the crazy thing is just Ishak is now on 10 goals, and he's only played 15 matches. He's got 7 goals for his last 7 games. Maybe one of the things that basically Eddie Howe has done is he did make that change from Callum Wilson to starting Ishak, and yeah, he's that's worked very well. Um,
Yeah, it
and
really has. Yeah,
and
he's got some options.
and another thing that we're saying is there was no Sean Longstaff last game, and you saw there was maybe Longstaff helped out for that first goal to help win the ball back, and I think it's maybe for that Ishak goal where he makes a clever run off the ball. I think it's like a give and go, where he gets into the box and then he kind of pass. He does a nice little clever touch behind him for Ishak to kind of follow through. And get a shot off. But you saw a little bit what Sean Longstaff has offered to this team. Now, maybe he doesn't get, maybe he's not the glamorous name, but he definitely he does a lot of work without the ball that Newcastle need because you saw them just last week without him. I think they tried Anthony Gordon instead, and it's just not that team just looked entirely different. It could not have been a more of a different contrast in the
Mhm.
last week to this week.
Oh yeah, absolutely, completely different. It was really bizarre. They got hammered against Villa, and then yeah, this week completely different, like you said.
And maybe a sign of a good team is when you aren't necessarily carried by a single player. I mean, there's no Miguel Almiron on this here, and it did feel like in the beginning of the season they were kind of being carried by his purple patch, you could say. And just take Jacob Murphy has just kind of just stepped up and taken his place. And the first goal just comes from him being in the right spot, being first to the ball. The second one is a fantastic hit. I don't really know if Lloris is being lazy here, but this is a crack from a good, 20 yards out or so.
Yeah, I think he just didn't see it, or it was kind of a knuckleball
That could
because he
maybe
didn't
be
he
it.
didn't dive at all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking that he maybe didn't see it, but he didn't have a great game either because there's another goal that he probably should have saved, and then he subbed off at halftime too with I think he had a muscle injury,
Yep.
which they didn't say at the time. I thought it was just because of performance, but yeah, it ended up being a muscle injury. But I think this one, I just think it was either knuckling or he didn't see it, but he certainly didn't have a good game either.
I mean, what's crazy is, I think I mentioned this before as well, not necessarily, for these 2 teams, but how much difference a year can make is bonkers because these 2 teams played a year ago, almost, to the month, and it was 5-1 in Tottenham's favor. And it's
That's
just
right.
also a year ago, Spurs were the team that was beating Arsenal for Champions League, and we've seen how much different that's gone. I mean, is I think the recruitment side is it maybe the bigger issue than necessarily Conte kind of flopping this season. Obviously, once you fired him, you've got chaos with the caretaker. You don't really see the direction that they're going with that. It seems they've even moved on with him with Ryan Murphy, who he's had a stint.
Ryan Mason.
Ryan Mason, they've had a stint with him before.
Yeah,
I think that was between the Mourinho and Conte thing. But obviously, it's not a long term project. And again, they're still not out of top four, so it's still wild. I don't know. Maybe the whole reason was Stiletti, I guess, wasn't getting the players' attention or whatnot. At least Murphy, at least, or Mason, at least played for Spurs at one point.
yeah,
I think so. Maybe
maybe.
he command a little bit more respect. But
Yeah,
I can't.
yeah. It seemed like too he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the locker room under Stellini. He was the guy that the players trusted more, from
I
what
could.
I'm reading.
I could see
So,
that. Yeah.
but maybe that's why, because he was like he's young. It hasn't been that long since he was playing for Tottenham. So maybe that's why. But yeah, I agree. Not a long term option. Maybe finish the season with him. I mean, I guess I don't know who they're going to hire like this late, but yeah, definitely temporary.
I mean, but the problem is they're not gonna have a fun summer, because you're gonna have more Kane drama,
And try to
especially
just hang on to
especially
Kane.
after
Yeah,
something like this, because there's another year where, his had that long contract that he signed, it's once it gets down to, like, 2 years, you usually see teams think about selling then because, after the 1 year, you probably lose, I wouldn't say half of the value, but you lose a significant, percentage of it, so once it gets down to 2, that's when you really do start to see teams kind of think about this. And
yeah,
Kane might try to push it because he is the Spurs all-time scorer. He doesn't really have anything else to leave him with. And
yeah,
unless they can like convince him that there is going to be a reason to believe in this. Oh, I kind of mentioned it last week. I look at Newcastle as more of an exciting project right now and sustained project. Now, obviously, they've had an influx of oil money, but in this game, the Spurs were beaten by Jacob Murphy and Joe Linton. Ishak was they paid good money for him. But Spurs brought in Richarlison for a good amount of money in the summer. So
yeah.
I don't
He's
necessarily
been a
think
bust.
I don't think that it's been necessarily oil money per se. I just think Spurs have been smarter at looking at who they've brought in. And one player to really
Newcastle.
talk about is Bruno Gomes. And
Yeah,
I feel like Spurs could have had a shot at him because they have a relationship with Lyon. They sent out Ndombele to be a loanee, at Lyon, where, he was, Bruno's, teammate at one point. So they dropped the ball on that, and you saw
yeah,
Spurs don't have anyone in midfield that can do what he does, what he offers. Someone that's good on the ball, someone that can also progress it, keep it to feet, but can also win duels. I look at Hoiberg. Hoiberg's not really a DM by trade. He can make some runs and he can be decent on the ball in an advanced position. Skip is just not ready for this. And then
yeah, yeah,
Sar is clearly not ready for this. So
yeah. Absolutely.
it's and another thing that's crazy is Pora hasn't necessarily come in and done well. Um, what did they do to bring Pora to the club? Oh, they shipped out Jed Spence on loan in France,
Yeah,
who's pocketing Mbappe. So and Perisic is getting up there in age. He has a lot to offer as a wingback in an attacking sense, but he's always been kind of vulnerable defensively, and we saw that here. He just wasn't able to mark anyone running behind him. And then you look at who they have at center back. It's Eric Dyer manning your defense, and one he started off as a defensive midfielder. And I think it was
Mhm.
Mourinho that just kind of moved him back because he wanted to play a back three and he didn't really have anyone else. Um, but
That's right. Yeah,
they haven't changed their back line this entire season. I think that's finally showing up.
yeah. True, true. Man, yeah, and it's not a good back four, and then you take out Betancourt too with the injury, and I think
100.
Betancourt's
Oh,
for
massive.
me that's when they start to really like nosedive because before that
Absolutely.
they were firmly in the top four race, and then they lose Betancourt. Maybe that's part of the reason why they didn't go out and try to get a defensive mid, maybe. But I mean, you got to plan for injuries because we've seen a lot of teams not plan for injuries, and
So they lost
it can cost you.
they lost Betancourt, I think, for the Leicester game. I was watching it actually at my brother's house. It was Super
Mm,
Bowl weekend. So I don't know if so was Super Bowl I guess was in February. So that was after the January window.
yeah.
So maybe you're right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe that is worth saying. But again, that's very short term planning. I
Yeah, for
mean,
some inevitabilities, yeah.
it's just you look at what Newcastle had been like a top three ish side when it comes to like pressing and turnover, and being relentless, and that's not what Spurs can do themselves.
Yeah,
So it's just it's almost fitting that this team is about to get Champions League, and it is scary, because they do have that oil backing. But Chelsea spent 600 million just in the last year. No one really piped up about that, and you just see what happens when a team just tries to basically do a a goodie bag list without an idea or thought behind it versus a team
yeah,
that they Newcastle whiffed on maybe on Chris Wood and Mac Target. Anthony Gordon is still maybe not necessarily working out, but they've nailed on Pope, Trippier, Bruno Gomes, Alexander Ishak, Dan Burn, and Botman.
yeah. They've done good business. Yeah, and they haven't gone out and shelled out a ton for a player individually. It's more the collective sum of the players, which is smart too. Because if one does bust, it's like, oh, well, we only spent 30 to 40 million on him. So it's not like, not $100 million player that we're busting on.
And I mean, there was a maybe point or I guess side where you could say there is a peak to this team because Howe is still doing some magic with Joe Willock, Sean Longstaff, Jacob Murphy, Almiron, and Joe Linton were all players that Steve Bruce had. So
Oh yeah, yeah, you're right.
can these guys also play at the Champions League level? Long term, we'll have to necessarily see about that. But I mean, that's just another reason to like praise what Howe has done. Howe has had some money to spend, and the club has spent it properly. But he's also done a really good job to mix the players that they brought in with the core that was still there, and everyone has just improved. Everyone's just up a level, up to their level.
Yeah,
Even someone like I think we were like making jokes a little bit about Jacob Murphy being bench depth, earlier in the season, and he's really he's done something. He's been training better. He's just improved, and Willock just seems to have been up a level as well.
yeah, and I think possibly how it could be up for manager of the season too. We'll see what happens with Arteta and Arsenal. If they blow it, then I think my manager of the season would or of the year would be Howe with what he's done. Because when he took over, I believe they're like second to last, weren't they? When Howe took over, and look where they are now.
I think they
So
were last. Yeah.
last, wow, yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I guess you could say people were maybe. Well, we'll have to see what Emery does with Aston Villa. I'd say if Gary O'Neill
True.
can keep Bournemouth up, that would probably be my pick. That's kind of lame. I'd probably go with Arteta. People were wondering if Arsenal could just get Champions League. I think that was kind of the goal, and
True.
they he's
Yeah,
been able
it's top
to
four.
he's been able to keep, and it's the youngest. They said that game was the youngest, or a game between the youngest with Southampton to the second youngest squad
Yeah.
with Arsenal. So he's doing this with such a
Huh.
young squad as well. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's been fun.
but one last thing to say about Newcastle is I'm at a point where I kind of look at from a Liverpool fan, I need United to maybe mess up before Newcastle because I think they've at least got minimum fourth secured. Maybe something can happen to Bruno Guimaraes. I feel like that team would struggle to replace what he has to offer. But
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. Like Eddie Howe has really done the right call to start Ishak because it's I don't really see a weakness that he has in his game, and it's kind of crazy he wasn't scoring more in Spain. Spain played a different kind of football, but he's good with the ball at his feet. He's got hold of play. He's super tall, and he can make runs in behind, and he seems to have a sense of where to be in the box, and he can put stuff away. And
Yeah.
he scored 10 goals, and he's only played 15 because of that injury he had. He's looking to be a home run.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's pretty young too. So they've got. It looks like they will have a pretty good attack for years to come if they can just keep everyone there. Which why would you leave if they're going to be in the top four?
And with Spurs, we kind of mentioned it before. Everyone's gonna look at the manager and whatnot. To me, it's a sporting director. I also look at who have they brought
Yeah,
in. They brought in Richarlison, someone like Danjuma. Um, they've never. I feel like they've never. I mentioned Bruno Guimaraes. They've never, to me, had a midfielder that can kind of uh, that can at least find a ball, complete a pass to Harry Kane, to his feet.
yeah,
You've had Son or Kulusevski kind of drop in to do that. You've had Kane almost being like the playmaker. They've never they lost Christian Eriksen to Inter Milan. I want to say like 4 seasons ago, and it's just I don't feel like they ever replaced him.
yeah.
And it's
Well, the
it's
sporting director resigned, I think, didn't he? Because he was part of the. I believe he was at Juve when they were breaking all the rules, and so
oh
that's he resigned. I think
was he like
Petri.
was he like
Petri, yeah.
was he like Conte's guy or was he always just kind of there?
I have no idea.
Well,
I'm not sure.
it's good. Well, that's a positive in my opinion because the sporting director has been bad.
Mhm.
So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
because
he's gone too. So the club's in a bit of a mess,
so
really.
I think they need to get that before they think about doing another a coach. Because a coach probably wants you need to know how the coach is going to want to. W- I guess there's a little bit of both. You need to have an idea, essentially a long term plan. I guess I would say because you can't necessarily bring in a coach who wants to play a certain style, and then the sporting director wants to target players that don't fit that style. So
Yeah. That's not going to work. Yeah.
yeah. And then that's pretty much it for the Spurs. I mean, it's just crazy to see how them trying a entirely different formation that they haven't really tried this season. And again, it was just a year ago where Spurs were above Arsenal for Champions League. And what happened? Arsenal went out and got Jesus and Zinchenko. They had Saliba on loan. They brought him in, and Spurs, after getting Champions League, they went out and got Richarlison,
Mm.
knowing that your back line was who it was. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah, they
see.
knew who they had at the back line and didn't fix it.
We'll see what Mason can do. I mean, they have a turnaround they have a quick turnaround or a quick match to turn this around with Man United. Now I think it's at Old Trafford, but I mean, and they have Liverpool on the weekend. Um,
Mm. Yeah,
they could still find a way to back into this, but you can't just rely on Harry Kane to have 25 goals and just bail you out every single game. And it felt like that's what they were doing.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Harry Kane put him on his back at times.
All right, and we'll move on to Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. This one ends 3-2, and not really in a way I was expecting. The first goal did come in the second half from Jota. It's just kind of Forest not really able to defend a corner kick. Fabinho wins it, kind of heads it towards goal, and then Jota's able to knock it in. And then Nico Williams ties it 1-1, and then Jota again. I think all of these goals came on set plays for Liverpool, which is another thing that's worth saying.
Yeah.
It's just it's a foul. I think Jota actually causes the foul. Um, Robinson, sends a ball in, and no one marks Jota. Jota actually has a time to take a ball off his chest and on his knee, and also volley it in. And then things got crazy here. And Morgan Gibbs White was able to tie it at 2-2. And this is symbolic. This comes from a long throw in, and Liverpool just not being able to handle it. No one marking Gibbs White in the box. I don't really understand that. And then
Mhm.
Liverpool were able to win with Salah getting the deciding goal again from a free kick. And it's one of the few times when Salah was actually able to get a touch in the box. The way Liverpool were playing was bad, and I'm going to get into that a lot. Just there weren't many times because Salah was basically playing on the touchline all game, and
Yeah.
this was one of the few times he was able to actually be in the box, and he has a nice finish.
Yeah, it was a great finish and great setup too.
And I spoke about last show how the only thing I was like looking forward to, watching this team was to see Trent in a different role. His veteran midfield role, and yeah, he was good. Again, yeah, his numbers weren't nearly as spectacular as versus Leeds. I think he had like 91% accuracy. For versus Leeds, he was more in like the 75. But he's having to do pretty much all of the build up, all of the creation in the midfield because as we'll get to the other player, I don't want to see Jordan Henderson see either field the rest of the way, because he was just there are a couple of things that he did that really did set me off. Um, so
Yeah, yeah, true. I mean, that just he's too old.
Well, it's not just the old. It seems well, he's the captain. That's another thing too. But he's barking at people, and it just seems like no one is recognizing him. On the second goal that Nottingham Forest score, Trent Alexander-Arnold before this, Trent Alexander-Arnold sees Henderson and is able to maybe make a run in behind, and Henderson just doesn't want to do it. And Trent Alexander, hits the ball, and the ball just kind of goes back to Forest. So give the ball away, and then Forest kind of go long, and then Liverpool kind of struggle. They get the ball back, and then they press Allison into kind of turning it over, and then on the ensuing throw in. You see him marking at Darwin Nunes, hey, mark this guy, or go away. I've got the Morgan Gibbs White, and then Henderson leaves Gibbs White to just be alone. And then after the goal, you actually see him looking to who to blame, and he's like, oh, it was me. But
Oh man.
it's just he's what he has to offer to the club just isn't it's not useful anymore. He can't make overlap runs. He doesn't want to run anymore. He can't recover. He can't do any kind of defensive running. He doesn't really offer much without the ball. He doesn't really go into to tackles or duels, which we'll get to. I think he competed in like two in this game, but. Another thing is just anytime he gets the ball, it's sideways or backwards. It doesn't do anything to advance any kind of attack. And I think you see players almost don't want to pass him the ball anymore. So he's just hurting
Hmm.
you in multiple ways. So
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Maybe he's a good locker room presence, but that's about
Well, he's for being captain, which isn't great. Once I guess whenever when he doesn't play, I think Van Dijk is captain. I would like to see Allison captain, to be honest. But
Mm,
um, I
mm,
mean, the only thing to maybe say here is Jota and Salah basically saved Klopp from basically having a horror show. Because I think he made some errors, here. I mean, 85% possession, but Liverpool only had 2 shots in the first half. They weren't really able to play. It seemed like they weren't able to play against a low block. Now, Forest did not even try to play this game. That's another thing. I don't want to say the T word because Alex doesn't like me saying that, but this was anti-football. They were sitting in a block, and they completed 75 passing all game. And they almost scored because Liverpool were not able to defend long throw-ins. But the lineup to me was a little off. Another thing that's worth saying is we've seen multiple times now where Thiago's been fit and hasn't started. So we saw Curtis Jones play again on that left midfield, and he doesn't really offer a lot with the ball, but what he does is he's actually really good at coming back and recovering. He challenged himself for 10 duels. I think he won like 6, so that's not terrible. Henderson, I mentioned the numbers that he has, far less. So there's at least some of that, but without Jota and Salah being able to finish, I don't think Liverpool would have scored this game. So it
mm.
was
Yeah.
they had 5 big chances and 3 missed, but a lot of those really did come from set plays and nothing really in open play. And we saw a little bit of that in Leeds in that first half. It feels like Klopp's trying to force Gakpo to come into the side, and it seems Gakpo was a winger in Holland or in the Eredivisie, and he's been kind of forced to kind of play be Bobby Firmino, kind of be the false nine, and it seems like he's still struggling with that. He doesn't know when to drop deep. He seems very stagnant in his movement. Now, when he gets the ball at his feet, he's good. I will say that, but it just seems that there's too little of that. And he's being
Hmm.
played over Darwin Núñez. Personally, I would like if everyone's fit with Luis Diaz back, my front three would be Luis Diaz, Jota as your striker, and Salah. I think
Hmm.
Jota is the guy that kind of makes a lot of things tick.
Yeah, he's been brilliant since he came back, and well, when he first came back, you saw glimpses, but now you're actually seeing him knocking the goals, which is a big deal for Liverpool. They need him.
And what's funny is, Trent again is being played in this new kind of role, and I think I mentioned it to you. I thought the idea was maybe kind of make him, Kevin De Bruyne, kind of make him kind of a bombing right-sided midfielder who would just have a little bit of a free roll, where he could, try these really good crosses into the box, which with really good delivery. And it seems the idea maybe is to play him, make him maybe in more into a Kimmich role, where he's more of a
Oh
deep
yeah.
lying playmaker because or it seems they're trying to copy what Zinchenko does for Arsenal. Because he's not
Mhm.
really bombing forward a lot. He's dictating the play from a deeper position. So that is interesting to see. And one thing that at least that's doing is Fabinho isn't by himself anymore. So when Fabinho's kind of in duels, you've got Trent kind of close to him, so he's able to help out a little bit with that. The only issue is with Henderson not being able to offer any kind of running back defensively, that right side, that wing side is open, and that's forcing Kanate. Kanate, when he goes to ground, is going to have to get that right.
Oh,
Or he's going
absolutely.
to get a yellow card, or he's going to miss, and that's going to allow anyone to really have a chance on goal. So that would be the only thing I would be worried about. At least playing this kind of formation, but you're forced to do it, and I think Klopp recognizes he's forced to do it because Henderson offers nothing in the role that he has. So it's almost like a way to kind of take the responsibility without Henderson having the ball.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would help for sure. But they got to do something.
I mean, Fabinho on 9 cards means one more means a two-match ban, and you got Spurs and West Ham on the schedule, two very physical sides. Spurs are
Yeah.
going to want to do something to make people forget about what happened in Newcastle. So I mean, at least that game's at Anfield. I'm worried about this game coming up with West Ham. Because
Yeah.
I Konate kind of struggled a little bit with Awani, and Fabinho's not necessarily going to be able to help out defensively because he can't get a yellow card. So worry a little bit with Antonio, to be honest. And Declan Rice has started to actually heat up a little bit for West Ham. And then another thing we're saying is Thiago did come on and gave a cameo in the second half, and he was poor, to be honest. So that was a little unnerving. So. Uh, I think, I mentioned how I'd like the front three to maybe be, Diaz, Jota, and Salah going forward. I'm at a point where I think, the midfield is such a disaster. The only way to maybe make it work a little bit is, to try, keep trying Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones at least offers he has legs. He's actually really good at recovering, and he seems willing to go into duels. So that yeah, 5 or 6, for ground duels. But
Ooh, pretty good.
the there's no one that to really, make a pass. So I would maybe play Elliott, try Elliott again. Um, because he can't be worse than Henderson. Elliott's not necessarily that great either. You need someone to at least be able to make an overlap run, to allow Salah to play more inside because Salah likes going. If no one does that, Salah is going to play on the wing, and that's hurting you. You need Salah to kind of get the ball more, y- more near, closer into the box. And one way to kind of force that is to have an overlap run where at least a fullback has to respect that overlap run.
Mm,
Elliott can maybe do that. Fabio Carvalho could maybe do that. Klopp doesn't like playing him. Oxlade Chamberlain could have done that, but he doesn't like playing him too. But
yeah, true.
it is unfortunate that they're in this situation because you finally have a lot of the attackers finally healthy. You finally have Kanate healthy. Well, in quotes, he might not play versus West Ham. Um,
Yeah.
but the issue is, it seems like they prioritize Gakpo over a midfielder. Now, I think the idea was similar to what happened with Betancourt. Is they actually thought
Mm,
this 18-year-old was actually ready to play the rest of the season, and he got a season-ending injury. But that to me is insane. You're trusting your entire season on Champions League on an 18-year-old, instead of actually trying to bring someone else in. And Wolves signed Yao Gomez, for basically a similar fee, that Gakpo was signed for. So there were options out there to at least, if something like that would have happened, this team would have finished third. In my opinion, not
mm,
not fifth or where they're going to finish because
yeah,
eventually
wherever they
that
finish.
midfield position is going to show up.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
And then
definitely.
one last thing to say about Jota is, he gets 2 big goals, and all he's done is produce since coming back to the 11. And one thing I want to say here is, Salah has all these records and whatnot, but the Liverpool's record when Jota hasn't been able to play since he's returned or since he's come to the club is staggering, to be honest. And since like Firmino's decline, it's happened like since Firmino's declined as well. But you've seen Liverpool's entire attack suffer, except when Jota's able to play. So he's almost been like Klopp's little secret to unlock low block sides because something we talked about before is Jota's not afraid to put his foot through it. He's also really good at sensing where a ball's going to land, and he's really good at getting cutback goals or getting tap ins. It's clever movement and clever sensing. So he's a really good. He sometimes doesn't have like the best hold of play, the best. He's not really the most, he's not the quickest or whatnot, but he's just really good at creating chances for himself and putting them away. He's got a really good shot conversion rate.
Yeah, he does actually, which is I was a little surprised to see honestly how high the conversion rate was, Ben.
I mean, it's funny. Like there's been all season, something online that a lot of people have said is, Liverpool are missing Mane. That's the reason why this is happening. And I think my take now is Liverpool have not necessarily missed Mane. They've missed a fit Jota this season because he started off without. I think he was able to maybe play a Community Shield game, but they weren't able to. He got injured, I guess, after that. So he wasn't able to
Mm,
play like the first quarter of the season, and then he got hurt after the Man City game. So.
yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah,
he's just 5 goals from tallying Darwin Núñez or, getting what Darwin Núñez has. I think if Klopp plays Jota the rest of the way, he'll match him or surpass him, which says a little
really.
bit
Mm,
about Darwin Núñez, but we'll necessarily see.
yeah,
Um,
a lot about Jota too.
and the reason why I'm spending a lot of time on Liverpool is I've got nothing positive to say about Forest. I think this kind of playing deserves a points deduction. And it's also weird because the manager, Jamie, likes him, Cooper, but he made a decision to
Steve
sit Brennan
Cooper.
Johnson, and the way Liverpool were actually somewhat scrambled, on the few times when they were able to at least, get a transition moment, it was just Awani by himself. Morgan Gibbs White wasn't anywhere near it. Brennan Johnson would have probably given, Robertson some hell, and it was a mistake not to start him. Brennan he came on
I
and
think
nearly
you're right.
scored.
Yeah.
He nearly tied it at the very end. So,
Yeah. I
um
was expecting a lot from him when they got him at the beginning of the year too, and I think it's just been a victim of how many players that Nine Vars
One
have.
hundred, one
Also-
hundred percent. Yeah, it just he seems to, like, not really know what the idea is either. I mean, there's not really a thought
Oh, I
behind
think
it, and,
I think he scored 15 goals last year too. I
76
think, which is
70
quite a
76
lot.
76 passing. I thought I when I saw that, I thought it was a joke.
Yeah,
They only attempted, like, 120. So, I mean, that this is just that was a
yeah,
bad
it's pretty bad.
that was a bad game.
Yeah.
Alright, let's see what we're doing. Oh, that's actually not that bad. Alright, and then we'll move on to, Leicester and Wolves. And this one, Leicester get a big win, 2-1 over Wolves, but they concede first, with Mateus Cunha. Yuri Tielemans actually, caught on the ball, I think by Mario Lemina, and it's a really good finish, by Cunha. And then I was watching this game, before the Liverpool game, because I was like, "Well, I'll just kind of record it on NBC, on at, like, DVR, and then I'll watch, like, the actual, like, Peacock game." And then, I ended up actually having to change after that. I couldn't stand it because I was like, "How would they not scored yet?"
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that.
but, 'cause so what's weird is watching this live, Wolves started off the better side. Leicester were struggling to, get near the ball, and Wolves actually were keeping it around a little bit. But then, they changed with, Iheanacho kind of getting a PK, and he forces it. Iheanacho gets the ball, he was almost played as a 10. So Jamie Madison wasn't able to play this game, and, he had a really nice through ball that Vardy was able to run onto, and is a foul on Vardy, and it's really good, PK by, Iheanacho. And then, they get the second goal with, Castagna, and this was a fantastic goal, worth talking about as well. I mean, this was,
Oh, that was a great goal. Yeah.
Leicester needed this, especially after what happened, last week with Man City. And one thing that I think was good to see is, I was making jokes about Dean Smith being appointed, and obviously, he brought on, John Terry, with him because they were together at Aston Villa.
Mhm.
I was like, "Well, brought in Dean Smith over, Potter or someone else," and, I didn't like the idea, because they went with, like, a back five last week, and this week, I called it the death formation because he went with 4 number 9s. 'Cause it
Ooh.
it was it was Tete, Iheanacho, Daka, and Vardy. That was, like, the front four.
Oh, that's bad.
'Cause so you saw a little bit why Wolves were having a lot of the ball, at least in that first half. Uh, you had four attackers that weren't necessarily pressing a whole lot. Vardy was doing really, really not a whole lot. He was able to draw the PK, and he did actually end up getting kind of hurt on that. Leicester were much better in the second half, I think, because, he moved Iheanacho kind of forward to kind of be the main attacker, and he brought, Dewsbury Hall on. And, Leicester were a little bit more compact, a little bit in the middle, and were able to kind of, force a few more turnovers, and that's actually what led to the second goal. So
Yeah, but yeah, well, you mentioned like this is the less we want to see. It really was finally, and I guess it took getting rid of Brendan Rodgers to kind of make it happen. I guess, which is kind of weird, but
well, I can't remember the last time there were a couple times when he played, Iheanacho and Daka together. I can't remember when he played Iheanacho
right,
and Vardy together. That was
yeah,
just
like never.
It was almost like the idea was, Iheanacho was like insurance for Vardy, which was weird because this season Vardy has looked like, Father Time has caught up to him, and it should have been the
Yeah,
opposite. And, Rodgers not doing that, I do think, or he was like he was kind of doing that with Daka. He would like switch Daka and Vardy together. So
yeah,
yeah, I do think there's some of that.
interesting for sure.
I mean, I want to get to the second goal because it's a very, very good, setup, by, Sumare, and Daka here. So Sumare does a 1-2 with Daka, and what happens is, he gets the ball back and quickly plays a nice through ball upfield to, Christensen. Christensen making a run, and then, this also happens because, Daka has come short, and what he's done is he brought Semedo to follow him. So he's out of position when Sumare plays the through ball. But Iheanacho does really well here as well because he makes a darting run that, like, drags 2 Wolves players with him, and what that does is that opens a little bit of space, behind him where Christensen is able to kinda play the ball, and Castagna smashes it home, one fullback to the other. But right before this, Leicester had gotten a corner kick, and what they did is they did something similar on the other side of the field where Tete had dropped deep and brought the fullback onto him, and they'd done a 1-2 with Tielemans, and Tielemans sent a ball over the top that to Castagna to run on the end of, and Castagna's cross was deflected for a corner kick. But Wolves
Mhm.
struggling with this overload action. Uh, because it seemed like Mateus Nunes and Sarabia did not recognize or not do enough to help out Wingside on defense. So when the fullback, was having an issue, they falling for a forward kind of dropping deep and following them. They didn't have any cover when Leicester's fullbacks were running behind them.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Which, yeah, I mean, which is weird because they usually, I feel like Wolves are pretty good defensively usually,
Yeah,
but yeah, just Leicester giving them all sorts of trouble in this one.
it was clever, yeah, because they were outthought at least for that goal. And Leicester gave them a chance to gave them a preview of maybe what they could do because they did it on the other side a little bit before that. Um, I mean, I just think
Yeah, true.
it, it, it is like you mentioned. I mentioned like the death formation, but they were struggling to have a little bit of control in the game. But one thing that did is because you had once they were able to actually get the ball to their attackers, you had 4 guys that were able to kind of square up and shoot, and that maybe forced Wolves kind of defenders to think about things differently too. So it was risky by Smith, but it worked
Yeah,
out.
definitely.
And to
Yeah,
do it
yeah, I think Smith did really well, but maybe he was like, I don't have any other options. Maybe
well,
he was desperate. I don't know.
well, he didn't have Jamie Madison. Madison had I think he was 6, so they've got a big game I think versus Leeds this weekend, which they'll need to win. Whoever wins that game, I think will secure safety. Whoever loses will
Yeah,
will
yeah,
be in bigger spot bigger trouble than they are now.
big trouble,
Um,
big
but
trouble.
so maybe you'll see Madison, for that game. They're close to getting Harvey Barnes back, but they're missing Harvey Barnes as well. So some of this was out of necessity. But other than Daka, so maybe Barnes would play over Daka. I did like the look of this. Obviously, Vardy's probably not gonna be able to go. So play
Yeah,
Iheanacho instead. But I liked the look of Tete. I liked him dropping deep, but he's also able to offer a running behind. Iheanacho seems to me he seems capable of being able to lead a line by himself. He actually played as a number 10 this game, but in the second half he was the guy making forward runs. He was the guy kind of being the focal point, and he seems to be able to make runs and hold on to the ball himself. So I actually did like the look of this. So we'll see if it works.
yeah, I agree. I like the look, and I think it's notable saying too, mentioning that Faust started with Soyuncu instead of Harry Suter this game.
Really good
So maybe
call.
that's a
Yeah.
partnership going forward too.
A-
So
And that is another thing I wanted to get at. So like obviously the players weren't necessarily it wasn't working with Rogers, but another thing happened too. Like you know, uh, in the for the last few years, it was almost kind of universally accepted that Leicester were nailing their recruitment. With guys that they were bringing in. You lose. They were just able to kind of move on from guys. You lost Conte, brought on Ndidi, things like that, and
true,
it changed where they were. They lost Fofana to injury and brought in Vestergaard, and Vestergaard just was a horror show. You lost Ben Chilwell and brought in Ryan Bertrand, who's also not really worked out. You lost Harry
yeah,
Maguire and Sorenchu was kind of the replacement. Sorenchu hasn't necessarily been a bust, but he hasn't necessarily been great. And in this one, they brought in Harry Suter to kind of fix their defensive issues, and that hasn't really worked out. Rogers' idea to losing Schmeichel was to try Danny Ward, and Ward was like the worst
mhm.
goalkeeper to start the season. That's the reason why they started the season off so bad. They gave up more goals than anyone else, and a lot of them were from Ward errors.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he was dreadful in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned how the game with Leeds. I mean, what are your thoughts on maybe Leicester versus Leeds?
Well, I kind of agree with what you said. Like the winner of it will be in pretty good shape, I would imagine.
Hmm.
I mean, unless like the teams around Leicester and Leeds if they win, but yeah, I mean because it's literally Leicester 28 points, Leeds is right above them on 29. Slightly better goal differential for Leicester too. So I feel the same way you do, Ben. I think the winner of this, if there is a winner, will probably put them in safety. I don't know though. I can see maybe like a tie scenario happening, and a tie would just I mean, it could be helpful in the moment, like if Everton lose and Southampton and Forest lose, and a tie would help. But I think one of these teams needs a win. I don't know. A tie would just continue, in the uncertainty for another week. point wouldn't really do much for both of these guys. So I
So
don't know. We'll see. It'll be a good game.
that might actually
Someone will go for it, I
I
think.
didn't
But
yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a really good point because sometimes you see that where teams go into we just can't lose, and you sometimes see games like these things kind of be like really really cagey. Like you
mhm.
mentioned, I guess the term is 6 pointer, right? Um,
Yeah, six
yeah,
pointer. Yep.
and
And the
then
form is like it's the current form is going Leicester's way now too because Leicester had lost a bunch in a row before they pulled out the win, and Leeds have lost three in a row. So form goes a little bit towards Leicester's way as well.
they're somewhat now. This is before Vardy got hurt, but they're somewhat getting healthy again. I think they're close to getting Harvey Barnes back. Madison, I think, was just sick.
Yeah.
Ndidi's back. Ndidi came on in the second half. Tielemans is back, but he doesn't look match fit. He actually had a mistake for their first goal. And the reason why they get the second goal is because Christensen, the left back, has a really good run and a really good cross, and he's easy to forget because he was one of the few guys that they did bring in January, and he's actually been pretty good for them. I remember when Leicester played Arsenal, that was one of like the worst games in the season. It either ended like 0-0 or maybe Arsenal like won 1-0. But Christensen did a really good job on Saka. I remember, and
Mhm.
it's good to have him back. So they seem to have their most of their front line or back line back healthy as well because Castaña's probably their starting right back, and he had the main goal. So we'll see if Leicester have enough. And it seems Iverson has replaced Danny Ward entirely. So
Yeah.
that'll
Yeah.
probably be a change that we continue to see. For Wolves,
Yeah, I think so.
Wolves, I think, have done enough to be okay. This is probably a game that they'd maybe want back because it seemed things changed a little bit in the second half. But one thing we're saying is Yao Gomez was a tank for Wolves. He was 10 of 13 for ground duels, 11 recoveries, 2 tackles, but he had like 3 successful dribbles as well. Like he's good with the ball at his feet and could be impressed. Um,
Yeah.
just the issue is, I think for Wolves is brass tacks is once you get the ball in the box, the chances are going to come to Diego Costa, and it's just can he, yeah, can he, with his age, can he get stuff over the line? So it's a good thing that I don't think they're going to necessarily need any more points than what they have. But uh,
Hmm.
only I think they're going to get by this only barely. So it is worth praising what Leopards has been able to do, but it's still this is going to have to do some issues in January. But Gomez has been a good buy for them, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. In the summer, they're going to have to strengthen for sure. If they got to get a striker, like you said, for sure.
because
But 34 points, 14th, it seems safe for now.
they're in 34. They're probably going to need, I would say, 38. 40.
Hmm.
They say
Ooh.
40 is guaranteed. 38 is probably enough. But so they probably still need to get
Yeah.
get something. Um,
Yeah, 38 would be 10 points clear right now. But yeah.
And then we'll move
Hmm.
on to Fulham and Leeds. This one was the early one. This one it ended up 2-1, but the first half was absolutely dreadful viewing. One thing that I noticed is neither team was playing without a recognized striker, and that reflected it. There was just no one to dictate play, no one to cause no one to hold on to the ball. They tried Bobby Reed. Bobby Reed wasn't able to do it. They had to do Bobby Reed because Dan James is a Leeds player, and he wasn't able
Hmm.
to go. But it doesn't matter because they were able to play Harry Wilson, and Wilson got it off with a fantastic individual goal. But one thing we're saying is this goal happened because of a fantastic run by Anthony Robinson, who really starred this game. He's if he can improve on his end product, he's close to being not just good for US players. He's close to being a very very good fullback in Europe, or at least in England. Um, but he still has issues sometimes with his decision making. But he's getting close, and they get the second goal because of his cross. So he's a part for 2 of these goals.
Yeah, yeah, he's been great too, and I really like that side with Robinson and Ream, obviously America, but yeah, it's been a good part of Fulham, and Fulham's been doing pretty well. I know they've been sliding a little bit as of late, but they've had a really good season, and Silva's a really good coach. I mean, they get whenever Mitrovic next year comes back because I think he's out for the whole year after pushing that rep, but Yeah, it's been nice to see him get wins without Mitrovic because that was a concern at the beginning of the year is who would score if he was out, and he's been out a lot, and they've figured out ways to score and ways to win.
Right, 2 wins, in a row, versus teams that definitely were trying to win versus them. Because you're taking points from two relegated sides that are really desperate. Um, and then Leeds were able to get something with Bamford coming on in the second half, and I think it's a Paulinho own goal, but I'm gonna give it to Bamford. But
Yeah, it's probably no.
just to be nice. But I think that really was kind of the storyline is who Leeds were playing. For their lineup because they started without a striker. And another thing too was they brought in Somerville, but in Lee Cooper returned and Max Rober returned as well, which we've talked about. They've missed him, but they were playing Warber as the fullback, and Warber is actually kind of at fault for one of those goals. But another thing too is how Fulham get that second goal is it's just kind of a ball kicked over the top, and it's just I think Rucka is beaten on a header, and what happens is McKennie has left Rucka to be a number in the box, and so there's no more protection in that center of the field, and Fulham just kind of ate up on that. So I think McKennie is almost being wasted. They brought on there's someone like Somerville, not Somerville, Forshaw, who they can maybe try. Obviously, they're missing Tyler Adams, but I think McKennie's causing issues for them. Jack Harrison is causing an issue a little bit as well. Obviously,
Yeah,
not having a striker, I think is not hurting is hurting Harrison's game because he likes crossing
yeah,
in. He likes playing off a striker. So maybe Bamford back can help out with that. Weird not to see Rudder, which you
yeah. No rudder
paid all
again.
that money and you're not even like using him.
Yeah, not he
that's rough.
appears to be a bad signing. Yeah,
And another thing we're saying is, Leeds are kind of similar with Everton in the fact that the player that they lost is showing up maybe a little bit for them because they had Richarlison last year,
absolutely.
who was able to kind of
Yeah, yeah.
create a little something for himself. And they tried to bring on Sinistera. Sinistera seems to like play. It seems like Sinistera, Somerville, and Nato all like playing on the left side. No one really likes that right spot, which is what you lost. And so you're having kind of balance issues that way. But Everton, lost Richarlison and haven't been able to, two Brazilians haven't been able to replace him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then some potential bad buys too. Rudder. We kind of questioned McKennie too. Maybe they could have, gotten a defender or something.
Yeah, I
But
think he's being wasted. Yeah, because he's not a he's played as a pivot midfielder. He's not a pivot midfielder. He likes running with the ball at his feet, and he likes kind of running into the box and being an option.
yeah,
And yeah, that's fine to do if you have because it doesn't seem like Rocca can necessarily handle midfield by himself. He seems kind of he's been a bit of a hit and miss spy as well. I don't even know if Tyler Adams can handle a midfield by himself. You need someone with presence. You need someone dominant. You used to have Calvin Phillips. That's another guy that they've lost and really
yeah.
missed.
Calvin Phillips. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was it was not the most compelling game in England, but for us, like you said, Tim Ream, Robinson, and McKennie, and Aronson. Another guy to talk about is Brendan Aronson, which is I feel like he's getting the ball a lot, but he's getting bullied a lot. Um,
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, he's kind of smaller. So.
did you like what you saw from any of them? I mentioned maybe Robinson. What do you think of him?
Yeah, Robinson was the best American on the pitch for me. He was great. I mean, you talk about how good he was. Yeah, he was the best player on the pitch for sure. I think Aronson's a good player, but I don't know. I think maybe he needs a little bit more talent around him. He can't be the guy like the chief creator on the team. I feel like he needs some more talent around.
Especially without a
Um,
striker to like bring
yeah,
someone off him.
with no, yeah, yeah, because he's gonna have to do a lot of the work himself at that point, and
Yeah.
you can't just like feed the ball into a big striker posted up in the box. So yeah, I think some of the guys on Leeds, some of the Americans, would do better on other teams, but I mean Robinson and Ream were solid. I'm a huge fan of both. Obviously, Ream's pretty old; he might not be at the next World Cup, but Robinson is looking like he'll lock down that left back spot again for the World Cup in the United States. So that's great. If he can start adding more in product too, just make him even better.
It's crazy because like I feel like Leeds have one of their owners or like minority shares is like the owner to like San Francisco, like the
Huh.
49ers. So there's some
Hmm.
kind of American stint there. And they brought in McKinney, obviously, as an American, but to me, it's weird how they didn't look at maybe Palace didn't wanna do it, but why didn't they look at Palace and be like, "Hey, can we take Chris Richards on loan for you? You're not playing him." That would have helped them out, I think, a lot more than what they did. So
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah, Sig and McKinney, they should have done something like that.
and it is unfortunate that they're missing Tyler Adams at a pretty crucial point, because no one is really able to play that pivot role. I mean, Leeds were just awful on the ball all game. That's worth saying as well. They've been setting in the
Yeah.
back defensively, but they weren't really good with it. I mean, they were better at least. Fulham didn't necessarily have a lot of chance creation themselves, but Fulham were playing without Dan James and Mitrovic and Vinicius
Yeah,
only played towards the end. I mean, the
that's
shots
right.
Fulham did have 12 shots and 5 on target. Leeds had 10 shots and 2 on target, and I don't really
Mm.
think it was maybe 3 apiece or three combined after the first half. First half was really rough. Game got a little bit better in the second half, but the passing leads again were under 300 passing, which has been a theme the entire season. You can't
Yeah.
if you can't keep the ball, that means you've got to do a lot of running without it, and
Yeah,
eventually that shows up
you
in the
get tired.
loss. Yeah, and
Yeah, 100%.
the one thing to say is Leeds do have Leicester and Bournemouth back to back, so they can play themselves out of it, which is crazy enough to say. But I mean,
Yeah.
what happens now is going to be that. So their season basically comes down to, and I think it's uh, a midweek game and this weekend. So the next time we do a show, we're going to be able to say if we think Leeds are going to be xed out or not.
Ooh, interesting.
Well, if they lose to Leicester and Bournemouth, I think that would be done so. If they can get maybe 4 points
I think so.
somehow, I mean that's it's not necessarily out of the question, but that would be especially Bournemouth. Bournemouth has a way to maybe close someone out. I think, but because Bournemouth aren't necessarily out of this too, which we'll get to. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, they're not, yeah.
and one thing I guess I'll do a little egg on my face is I went back and replayed a preview episode, Rex, where I was actually buying pretty hard into Jesse Marsh hype. So I was like, oh, Leeds can
Ooh.
maybe be surprised and finish top half because I liked what Brantford did
Ooh.
in the preseason. And the issue is just they haven't had Bamford all season, which I guess I should have
Yep.
seen because they didn't have him last season. But another thing too is I ignored their defense. I looked at who they brought in. I was like, well, I like Tyler Adams. I like the idea of Sinistera. Nato looks interesting. I ignored that. They even with Lee and Cooper, which I don't necessarily rate. The back line is really really poor, and
Really
they've
poor, yeah.
gone too long without addressing it. I don't. Melee is hit and miss as well. I think Melee had actually an issue with one of the balls that was crossed in. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of blame to go around. I don't necessarily think it's just Marsh.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's just not Marsh. Maybe the board too, not giving enough money. Maybe Marsh did wanna bring in, a CB or something, we don't know, but
Well, it's just they have Verpa, and it was where you got Werber back, and Werber was the center back or starting center back before Cooper came in, and you bring Cooper back, and I guess maybe both are left-footed. It was weird to see Werber played as fullback, and that didn't really work because he got caught with someone running behind him. Uh, and with Fulham, there's not really a ton to say. I feel like they've done considering that they're a promoted side, what they've done has been spectacular. That the fact that they're able to kind of coast a little bit, at this point in the season is worth praising as well. And they've been able to get 2 wins back to back when everyone kind of thought after what happened with Man United, that's going to be their season. They're going to go vacation. Um, you know, people like Harry Wilson has come in, gotten a couple opportunities, and really stepped up and taken them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've had a great year. Ninth place is amazing for 'em.
And then we'll move on to a Bournemouth. This is why I think Bournemouth might have some issues. Bournemouth and West Ham. Goals from Antonio, Paqueta, Declan Rice. Declan Rice had a really good week because he had a fantastic goal in Conference League, which we'll get to. And then Fornals. Fornals had, I think it's called a scorpion kick. This was
Mhm.
like a fake bicycle kick. This was insane. It was the fourth goal, so it didn't really matter. But it was good for Fornals because he hasn't had the best of seasons. But
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny because, I was thinking I mentioned last week, I thought it was crazy how, they were taking Conference League football so seriously, and I guess maybe the opposite side of that is, well, if you can score a lot of goals, you can get some confidence going, and maybe that's kinda the idea because, they looked Declan Rice and Antonio, have found their scoring boots. I don't know if it's because of Conference League or whatnot. Maybe they got some
Could
confidence,
be.
getting points versus Arsenal. But they look themselves again. Jared Bowen has looked, has started to look better, and I don't again, they this coincides a little bit with, Maury's job kinda being in jeopardy, and they've really
It
bounced
does,
back.
yeah. They have. And we talked about how they've done well when Moyes is in trouble and it looks like he might get sacked. And they really have. Antonio's scored two in this one, so maybe he's starting to come back a little bit, which would be great because these are some of the guys that has led them last year, Antonio and Bowen.
Mhm.
And part of the reason why they weren't doing well was because these two players really weren't living up to what they did last year. Maybe they're a little tired, but they're starting to click. And I mean, they look pretty safe now, especially starting to put together a good run.
Yeah, I
Um,
think they are.
so yeah, which is great. I like they're like a staple of the Premier League. So I'm glad they look to be safe, and I hope they continue to stay out of that relegation zone, which I think they will. But
And they could have been reactionary. I mean, because they were having so many bad results, at least in February. I mean, they easily could have been like, "Sorry, Moyes, we gotta save ourselves," because a lot of teams near them were doing that, and they've stuck with him,
mm,
which is worth that is we're saying now. Everyone's situation is differently. Moyes has a little bit more pedigree than I guess some of the other guys, but that's worth
mm,
I mean, maybe saying some as well. I do think this is a little bit more on the Bournemouth side though, because most of these were just kind of crosses come in where they weren't able to defend anything in the air or corner kicks. And that's been something that I think has been a theme that's been their bugaboo all year. And if they do get
mhm.
pulled down into this, it's going to be because of that. They've been bad on the set pieces and corner kicks all season. And you saw it again here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how you don't do something about it at this point. You know, it's a problem, and it just continues to happen. I don't know. Yeah, it could be a big reason if they do get relegated. It could be one of the bigger reasons why they got relegated is because they just can't do anything on set pieces. It's terrible.
And it would be such a shame because they actually play some pretty good stuff when they have the ball at their feet. I mean, 560 passing from a side this kind of level is bonkers. West Ham were the side that actually looked like they should be 270 78. West Ham were fine not
Yeah.
having the ball though. They're actually fine at trying to set some traps, some pressing traps, and that actually is what led to one of their goals.
Mhm.
It's a cross like that happens, but that is what happens. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess maybe one positive I would say for Bournemouth is losing 4-0. They kicked it up a little bit in the second half. I think O'Neal actually got a little of this wrong, unfortunately, because he brought on Watatara, he brought on Anthony as subs, and they finally peppered the goal a little bit. But another thing too is he played a back three versus Spurs last weekend, and I feel like this was maybe a game to stick with that and allow West Ham to have
Mm.
majority of the ball because it's one of those weird things where West Ham do better when they don't have the ball. They like trying to be a counter team. They like trying to press and cause mistakes. They don't. They're kind of a little bit like Spurs, where they don't necessarily have creation when they have the ball at their feet. Paqueta was supposed to kind of fix with that. He scored a goal in this game, but it came from like kind of heading it. He's still kind of hit and miss as well. So
Yeah.
there was a little missed opportunity, I think. I mean, personally, I would like to see Watatara and Anthony get more game time. Now, I know Tavernier and Ryan Christie have been able to help out here and there, but at least in this game, I think it would have been better for them to sit back and try to counter with those guys, maybe Billing and Solanke as well. So just a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it looks really bad too, 4-0, but they still have a chance, and they've been playing pretty well without this game. This game was kind of the exception to that, but
Yep, and they have, but I mean, another thing we're saying is so they have Southampton and Leeds next. So again, what I said with Leeds, I can maybe say with Bournemouth, where we might have to next time we do our show, we'll have to we may be talking about something different because they could be dragged back into this just simply because I'm trying to think of how Southampton scored their third goal versus Arsenal. It's Bella Kotchap, being a dominating force in the air. And
Yeah.
it's a, Cassetta Carr, just being, having a free header on a corner kick. And you think of how
Hmm.
Bournemouth are gonna struggle in the air, there's gonna be a chance maybe Southampton to get something in this game. And then
Yeah.
they have Leeds, in a span of 3 days, that game. So, this is a chance for Bournemouth to either, cement themselves to safety or to get dragged back into this. And another thing we're saying
Both those
is
teams too are going to have their back against the wall,
yeah,
so it's going to be tough.
it's a scary game because after that, you have Crystal Palace away is maybe your next most doable game. After that, it's Chelsea. Maybe Chelsea have nothing to play for. They could maybe get something at Chelsea. It's Man United at Old Trafford, and then the final game of the season is away to Goodison Park. And I would worry for
Yeah.
Bournemouth if they had to go into that game needing a win to stay up.
Yeah, me too. Because that would be tough at home too for Everton. Ugh.
Yeah, especially if Everton haven't secured safety at that point. That would be, and Everton have Calvert Lewin back. We'll see how long they have him back. But
Yeah,
that could be a different game. And then with West Ham, like you said, West Ham I think are safe. Maybe hopefully that'll help them out where they have Liverpool in the midweek. I guess tomorrow. They won't have to go into that game really hard because I do worry about Antonio a little bit. And another thing I worry about is Liverpool when Liverpool played them earlier in the season. Liverpool needed West Ham to miss a PK just to beat them. So that was
that's
at
right.
Anfield.
Yeah.
So.
Damn.
All right, and then, I don't know how we're doing for time.
I got 8 minutes. 8 minutes. I gotta go.
That's not that bad. Well, do you wanna talk about, Brentford and Aston Villa? Because we got a little surprise here.
Yeah. Yeah, we can skip the Palace Everton game.
Oh,
If you want.
I kind of was planning on it. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
Ivan Toney, and then Douglas Luiz at the very end was able to make this, even at, in the 88th minute. I mean, the interesting thing here, I thought, at least, for that Douglas Luiz goal, at least from a Brentford perspective, is, man, this was really unfortunate because you did everything right until that point. But
Yep.
before that goal came, there was like an onslaught where it seemed there was like 2 or 3 minutes where they weren't able to clear the ball and just Aston Villa were able to just kind of recycle, get a ball in, and win the ball back, recycle, get another cross in, and it just seemed one time was finally enough. And one thing I'm gonna say, and then I'll throw it to you, is I thought it was untimely to lose Christian Norgard. Yeah, I think it's just a knock, so it's not a long term injury. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe where it showed up a little bit towards the end because Norgard is pretty good in the air. He maybe would have been able to solve some of that a little bit towards the end, but still
Yeah, I
a
think
point
so,
here
actually.
wasn't bad. And they
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. And they're I mean, they're in a solid spot too.
they outplayed Aston Villa, an Aston Villa
They
team
did.
that were flying last week.
Flying high. Yeah, Aston Villa was on a tear, so it was really quite impressive by Brentford because Aston Villa were just playing so well. But yeah, disappointment because they had all 3 points and they haven't won in a while. So it's disappointing to be able to put together a great game, have the lead. You're close. You're basically 3 minutes away from the game being over, and Luis scores probably because Norgard was out, like you mentioned. So it was tough, but a tie is fine, and it was Villa. They've been playing really well, so I think it kind of shows, how good Brentford can be. Honestly, that they were, pretty much 3 or 4 minutes away from beating Villa. Even though Villa, we saw how good they've been playing under Emery.
I mean, Tony gets the goal, but the player we're talking about is really Mbeumo. And Bremer, I think, had 4 chances created. He was quite good with his delivery. He has the assist,
Assist, yep,
that leads to Tony. He played a fantastic through ball to Shada, who, Shada maybe made a mess of things, but, I think if you're a Brentford fan, it's good to see Shada, making that run and, he's young, maybe a calmer head, as he gets more of those chances will come because it's a bit of a bad miss.
yeah. I think he just needs more time, though,
But
like
the
you
running
said.
behind was good, but just Embremo was just very good at just finding that forward ball, and he was also really good when he got it. He wasn't just just trying home run passing. If the space was there, he was taking, he was carrying it. So he was able to advance it as well. So good ball progression, both with his vision and with his feet. Um, but
Yeah, definitely.
I got to talk about how they scored the first goal because it's a great cross by Embremo. But do you know who gets the ball? Who passes the ball to Embremo? Um,
Was it Norgard
it's
or
right.
Jensen? Oh, it
It's
was Rhea?
it's
Wow.
it's like a
He's so
70-yard,
good, though.
like, arrow ball directly to Mbeumo. It's insane.
He's so good.
That's a weapon.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully Brentford can keep him because I know, he's garnering a lot of interest from other clubs and he's going to be wanted. So hopefully Brentford can hold on to him because he's another really good player and a really important player. He there's a game where he made 11 saves in one game a couple weeks ago too. So he's good with his feet, but he's also a good shot stopper.
I think versus Brighton. Was that versus Brighton?
Yeah, I think it was Brighton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, Brentford honestly kind of peppered Villa. There could be a chance, a situation where yeah, it was hard. They had such a big win last week; it was hard to kind of regroup. I think that's kind of been a theme. It's been hard to keep that consistency. But I mean,
Yeah.
Villa only had 2 shots on goal. 14 shots, only 2 on goal. They did create a few chances, but the thing that was interesting here is Brentford were actually really good at not really allowing Watkins to get behind them. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so, you cut that space off, and it seemed, Villa struggled a little bit with that. But
Yeah.
still,
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, still a point, at, away at that stadium. It's not an easy place to play for any team. Um,
Yeah,
so
it really isn't. Yeah.
that's not the worst thing. And Brentford turn around. They have Chelsea coming up this week. We'll see if Norgard is able to go. I'm a little worried about that because the midfield options are weak. They were able to play Jan Yelt this game. I mentioned that last week. I thought he was maybe a missing link. He played and he wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily that good. They tried Onyeka for Norgard in that second half, and he wasn't necessarily that great either.
That didn't work
Janssen
either.
Janssen
Yeah.
was actually the guy kind of taking
Jensen's
ball responsibility. But
absolutely, yeah.
it feels that they're a little weak, a little bit in midfield. Now, Damsgaard came on in the second half and actually had a couple good moments. And Brentford almost won this game. There was a through ball to Weisa, who also came. It was also from Mbeumo, where
Mhm.
Weisa was just like a shoulder offside, but it was close.
That's right,
But
yeah.
Damsgaard and Damsgaard and Mbeumo had a. I think Damsgaard helped to win the ball back, and then it's a really good through ball by Mbeumo. So maybe some confidence for Damsgaard.
Yeah, maybe he'll start this Chelsea game, who knows? They were able to, play Chelsea last year really well. I think did they beat Chelsea, didn't they? I think, last year.
Oh, they smashed them. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they sma Tuchel's Chelsea. I remember that. Because it was like the Christian Eriksen, like, awakening game. Because I think
Yeah.
he, like, created, like, 4 assists by himself. Um,
God.
because that was after, Chelsea had just gotten hit with, like, the, Abramovich, like, sanctions because they didn't have, like, anyone in the stands. Um,
Oh, right,
yeah.
yeah. Huh, weird.
One thing to say with Aston Villa is Emi Martinez was like sick and had to get subbed off in the second half. And
Yep.
Olsen to me doesn't instill much confidence. So whoever they have, I think they
No.
have Fulham next. I personally sound salty about talking about Robert Olsen because I kind of blame him a little bit for allowing City to win the title last season because Emi Martinez wasn't able to play last year versus Aston Villa. Aston Villa had a 2-goal lead, and Robert Olsen, for some reason, forgot how to save shots kicked to him from pretty good distance out. Rodri scored, and I think Gundogan was able to get how to get like a tap in because no one was able to save like stop a cross. So
That's right, I
little
remember that, yeah.
little salty, but anyways. And then we'll kind of finish off with Crystal Palace and Everton. Nothing happened in this game other than Holgate getting a red card. I think that's maybe a blessing because Holgate was not necessarily good. They have Patterson back. They have Godfrey. You can maybe try to play him instead. From Everton's perspective, they got Calvin Lewin back. He wasn't great, but he did actually have. There was one point in the second half where he had an awesome drag back, like kind of like a spin move to get a touch, to turn around and get a shot off. The shot went wide, but that's just something where you see what maybe he can offer, what they've missed, because they haven't had any kind of presence in the box all season. Um,
Yeah,
they're getting him back at a big time, and
they are.
the only thing I'll say here is Decore is going to be back for Newcastle. Onana is going to be back for Newcastle, and I think that game is at Everton. And if Dice is going to do something massive and spectacular, I think they got to take some points that game. They got to defend their ground, even with Newcastle coming in.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Because I mean, they need to get some points. It's getting tight, and it wasn't necessarily a good weekend for them, even though they didn't lose. But the Leicester result put Leicester in front of them, and now
Right.
Everton's in the bottom four. So, I mean, a point might end up helping them at the end. We don't know, but yeah, I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think get him firing that could be a crucial part of them avoiding the drop, and that's a big if because he's been on and off injured for like 2 years. So
because
we'll see what happens.
Because it seems like that lineup that he played versus Arsenal in that first Arsenal game, it was like a 4-5-1. But the way that Onana and Decore were able to kind of make runs, also kind of be into the box. Calvert Lewin was almost like a decoy. It seems like that's probably the perfect way for Everton to play, and if he is able to kind of get this for the next, like, 8 games, I do think Everton will be able to make they will be able to get 6 points. They will be able to win 2 games out of that, but
Yeah.
the issue I have for Everton is their next 3 games are Newcastle at home, and then it's Leicester away. That becomes a massive game, and then it's Brighton away, which is not
Mm.
great. So
No, that's not great either. Wow.
so
Yeah.
if you're gonna pull a rabbit out of the hat, it's gotta come now. Now you're getting Doucouré back. Doucouré only missed because of red. Onana is apparently has a groin issue, so maybe you won't have him. But you
Mm.
need to you've got Calvert Lewin back. Calvert Lewin did something amazing last year versus I think it was Crystal Palace. He's gonna have to do something. He's gonna have to show up at least for this one game, versus Newcastle. And we didn't see it, for Spurs, this past week, but we did see Ollie Watkins was able to kind of frustrate, Fabian Schär and Botman a little bit. So maybe there's some kind of hope. I'm trying to get something to happen because I want Newcastle to drop points. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it could happen. It could happen. You never know.
I'll probably be, very poor in my efforts, but I'm trying to will it to happen, so we'll see. And then with, Palace, I think, are safety, and, 12 shots, only 2 on target. All that fun, all that high flying, I think, is gone. They were able to they'll get 3 wins on the spin, and, Hodgson at least come in, and he's played as and that's gonna be maybe enough, for them. I do think they do need Zaha back, so all of this has happened without Zaha. Maybe when he returns, he can
Yeah.
lift that offense again. But, keeper Sam Johnson was man of the match, which is not really good versus otherwise, poor Everton attack. So that kind of says where the game was. But that's pretty much it. Try to get through it, Rex. Got any last thoughts?
No, it's just the bottom part of the table is just so fascinating to me. Every week it's different people. Like this week now, Everton's in there, and it's just so tight. Top four is fun, especially the top race is getting tight too. It's like everything's tight right now. Top four, the title race, and the bottom three. It's all really interesting. So it makes for good watching. And I mean, we got Premier League middle of the week too. So we don't have to wait too long to
Yeah, it's not.
start the matches again.
Yeah, it's not just Arsenal and City. Like all of them were playing like in the midweek, and I was like, oh crap,
Today or tomorrow, yeah,
that's gonna be our next show is not gonna be fun. We'll try
yeah,
to
it's gonna be double.
We'll basically, yeah, we'll try to just do quickly, like, do a recap. I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of just list the scores for what happened, and then we'll give you a little time to talk about what happened with Arsenal and City. Well, maybe if it's a bad result, maybe you won't want to talk about it at all. Um, but
Oh, yeah, we'll see.
anyways, we've got a fun. This is a fun time to be an EPL fan because games are coming quick and fast, and uh, like you said, the way the table is bonkers. And
Mhm.
the way I'm starting to look at things is I look at the defense, obviously, but home form is starting to really look actually huge. Sometimes I kind of discount that. I do think like a home ground can maybe be enough. So we'll see if some of these home grounds are able to kind of get a massive upset where we just don't really see coming.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
we'll see. Oh, I guess that's it. So I want to thank you, Rex, for joining again, and I guess for us two at the reserve squad, you stay squatted
you stay squatty.
and stop recording.